I've been on dozens of road trips across North America. Neither of my parents like to fly, but they love to travel. So they load up the Subaru and drag me to Maine or down to the swamps of the Deep South, or out to the Sonoran Desert, or anywhere else on this wide continent. At 15 years old, I've been to 42 states, Canada, and Mexico. We live in Kansas, so we're in the center of everything. Sometimes we're visiting family. Sometimes we're going to national parks. Sometimes I think my father just picks a random spot on the map and decides to drive there hoping for an adventure. I don't mind it. My hometown is small and boring, the kind of place where people either move to the big city after high school or they fall down a long and dirty spiral of addiction, criminality, and despair. In my short life, I've grown to love traveling. The open road fills me with wonder. I can't help but imagine what it would be like to live somewhere else. From the red rock beauty of Sedona to the cozy alpine ambience of Helen, Georgia. My parents wanted me to see a whole world of possibilities from an early age, and I lapped it up. I've always wanted to be a truck driver when I grew up, someone out there roaming the countryside, never tied down, forever free, a rolling stone that gathers no moss. But things changed recently. My travels have taken a very dark turn, and it all began at a rest stop. I probably visited more rest stops in my short life than most adults. I've seen every kind, from elaborate state-sponsored welcome centers to sprawling truck stations with diners and convenience stores, to the basic, unmanned ones that pepper all the highways and byways of this strange land. My story begins 2 years ago at one such small, unassuming rest stop nestled in the Appalachian foothills. We had been on the road for 4 hours straight, and my bladder was about to burst, so we made a short pee break at a rest stop. After relieving myself, I decided to stretch my legs and take a walk around the heavily wooded property. The endless forests surrounding the area were dark and vine-choked. It was the dead of summer. The air is thick as molasses and choked with gnats and mosquitoes. I imagined what it would be like to live in such an impenetrable wilderness. Supposedly, there were still some moonshiners deep in the mountains living off the grid. And that's when I got the strangest feeling, almost like deja vu. The hairs on the back of my neck shot up, and then I turned around and I saw him for the first time. The boy looked a lot like me. He was short, pale, and freckly with light brown curls atop his head. He was a few years younger and wore a cool t-shirt with a velociraptor on it, my favorite dinosaur. The design was from the original Jurassic Park, which my father showed me when I was way too young, sparking my love for the franchise. "Hi," I said, waving. The boy didn't respond. He just stared at me for an awkward beat before running off towards the parking lot and disappearing behind some cars. Weird kid, I thought. And that was the end of it. The whole encounter was brief but unremarkable. In fact, I would have forgotten all about Velociraptor T-shirt, as I called him, had I not seen him at a different rest stop in Kansas a week later. I spotted the boy while perusing the vending machine for a Dr. Pepper. He was by himself again, standing on the outskirts of the parking lot, staring at the endless cornfields on either side of the highway. He wore the same Velociraptor t-shirt. I started to walk towards him, but my mother called me back to the car. "Dash, let's go." As I ran back to the Subaru and Dr. Pepperless, I felt that same electric shock on the back of my neck. I didn't turn around, but I knew what was happening. The boy was watching me again. Summer ended and I went back to school, hung out with my friends, joined the soccer team, played video games. Life went on. I forgot all about Raptor t-shirt. Was it weird that I saw the same boy at two different rest stops so many states apart? I mean, I suppose. But maybe his family had just taken a similar route on a similar road trip. Stranger things have happened. I didn't dwell on it much. No, that's a lie. I didn't dwell on it at all. Not until the holidays came around. That's when everything changed. We traveled to Michigan to visit my grandparents for Thanksgiving. It was blisteringly cold, snow falling in blinding sheets. On such trips, we limited our breaks to rest stops with large indoor complexes, restaurants, and convenience stores. It was too cold for the small ones with their mostly open-air facilities. We visited a mega truck stop on our way up to Ann Arbor. Inside, I passed a big bulletin board. It was stuffed with all sorts of ads and banners. Visit Sleeping Bear Dunes, buy Pennzoil, help stop trafficking. But one poster caught my attention above all else. Missing persons. It took up half the bulletin board and showed dozens of faces, names, ages, height, weight, last known location, and date of disappearance. I had seen countless posters like it at other rest stops across the country and barely glanced at them, but this one made me stop dead in my tracks. There was a Velociraptor t-shirt, smack dab in the middle of the poster. His name was Michael Winkins, aka Mikey, age 13. Last seen at a rest stop outside of Phoenix on October 13th, 2009. Holy shit, I said, moving closer to examine the entry. The poster included an age progression, showing Mikey with wrinkles and thinning hair. He's a ghost, I thought. It was the only possible explanation. But why would a ghost focus on me? Who or what had killed him? And was that same danger headed my way? Dash! I nearly jumped out of my skin. Dad grabbed me by the shoulder. I've been looking all over for you. Your mom grabbed us a table at Maggie's Diner. Come on. He had to tear me away from the poster. What are you looking at? The missing persons? I was just checking it out, I said sheepishly. Why? You recognize somebody on there? My dad asked. No, I said after a slight pause, hoping my dad didn't realize my lie. Well, if you ever do, just tell me, okay? Dad said. I'll handle it. Yeah, I know. My parents were always trying to get me to open up more. They said I spent too much time inside, scrolling Reddit on my phone or playing Minecraft on the computer. It was another reason why they brought me on so many trips, to get me to meet new people, to try new things, open up. Truth is, I liked being alone. I daydreamed about running away to live in almost every cool or interesting place that we had visited on our road trips. In each fantasy, I was living on my own. I don't know why I felt this way. I guess I envied the freedom of a lone wolf. Probably because my parents helicoptered over me so much, never letting me spend the night at my friends' houses, calling every hour to see when I would be home, tracking my social media. There you are. My mother stood up from the booth as Dad and I entered Maggie's Diner. She looked worried. We had been looking all over for you. You need to be careful at big rest stops like this, she said. It's easy to get lost. After that day, I decided that I would approach Mikey if I ever saw him again. If he were a ghost, there had to be a reason that I could see him. Perhaps he wanted me to solve his murder. Solving a cold case would be awesome. My friends and I all listened to true crime podcasts. We were obsessed with any unsolved ones because we could act like detectives. We would spend hours spinning elaborate theories about potential murderers, alternate causes of death, or people vanishing on purpose. 6 months later, I got my wish. My family was on another summer road trip. Mom wanted to visit sunny Southern California, see Los Angeles, Disneyland, the San Diego Zoo, and so on. We were on our way there when we took a break at a massive truck stop, smack dab in the middle of the Arizona desert. There were so many big rigs around the place that you couldn't even see the facilities until you were right on top of them. My dad gassed up the Subaru while I washed the car with one of those squeegee things, scraping 500 miles worth of bug guts off the windshield, the front grille, and bumper. Afterward, I told him that I was going to hit the restrooms. "Okay, but be back quick," my dad said. "We're losing daylight and we want to be in Phoenix before nightfall." I nodded and kept going. The rest stop was huge and packed with travelers, mostly big and greasy truckers or harried parents, struggling to keep their toddlers in check. There were multiple fast food restaurants, a convenience store, and plenty of restrooms. They even had one with showers. As I left the men's room, I saw Mikey standing by some floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the endless desert beyond. "Mikey?" I said as if he were some old friend. The boy didn't respond. I stepped closer, close enough to reach out and touch him. Mikey spun around to see me, surprised. I got that tingly feeling on the back of my neck again. "Do you need help?" I asked. Mikey opened his mouth but stopped himself. He looked frightened and perhaps a little confused. And then he muttered 2 words in a hoarse voice, like he hadn't spoken in years. "Go away." "What?" The boy didn't respond. Mikey ran outside the building. "Hey!" I chased after him. "Don't follow me." Mikey called out as he sprinted through a maze of big rigs parked on the sprawling lot. The boy weaved through them like he was following a secret trail that only he knew. He moved around objects like he was real, ducking beneath the truck trailers, squeezing between parked SUVs. But nobody seemed to notice him. No one except me. "Why are you following me?" I asked, still chasing Mikey. "You keep showing up at these rest stops." I started to fear that I was the victim of some elaborate prank. Mikey didn't respond. He just kept running, trying to lose me. But his short strides were no match for my long legs. I finally caught up with the boy amid a series of boulders on an island in the parking lot. Someone had set up a small camp in the area. There was a tattered tent, an old folding chair, and a discarded cooler. The campsite was hidden from the rest stop, a secret canyon amid all the chaos of travelers. I grabbed my knees, sucking in air. And ghost or not, this boy was fast. "What do you want?" Mikey asked. "What do I want? What do you want?" I asked. "You're the one who keeps showing up wherever I go." "I don't mean to," Mikey said. What the hell does that mean? I thought. "Are you a ghost?" I asked. "I saw your missing persons poster." "Not quite," Mikey said. "Look, I can't explain right now. You should leave." Was I dreaming? Was this a heat-induced hallucination? "Why do I need to leave?" I asked. "Because it's not safe around me," Mikey said. "You should be with your parents." "No one out there saw you except for me," I said, trying to wrap my head around the situation. "Oh, just drop it," Mikey said. "Go back to your Subaru, continue on your trip to LA. Forget that you ever saw me." "Wait, how do you know that?" I said. "You are following me." Mikey pushed me back. "I said leave." I almost toppled over, catching myself on a nearby boulder. Guess the boy wasn't a ghost after all. "Are you spying on me?" Mikey's eyes suddenly bulged. He stared at something behind me. I felt cold, icy cold. And then a hand clamped over my face, muffling my screams for help. The hand was massive, covered in a rubber glove that smelled of dirt and engine oil. I never saw its owner. I didn't see anything after that. Darkness. When I awoke, I was lying in the back seat of a sedan. I think it was a Volvo. The first thing that I saw was him sitting behind the wheel. "I'm sorry," Mikey said. "I tried to warn you." I shot up, adrenaline pumping. "What? Did you kidnap me?" But I didn't wait for an answer. I just opened the side door, which was left unlocked. It was nighttime outside. A full moon illuminated the desert landscape. "Mom! Dad!" I cried out, running through the parking lot. There were dozens of police cars parked at the rest stop, but my Subaru was gone. "They left me?" I said aloud. "They left me!" I ran to the nearest officer, a burly man who was checking out the vending machines. "Hey, I've been kidnapped. There's this boy and somebody grabbed me and..." The cop didn't so much as glance in my direction, no matter how loud I spoke. I tried grabbing his arm, but my hand just passed right through him. The officer continued speaking with his fellow cops about a missing boy named Dash Bowman. "Hey, that's me," I said, jumping up and down. Still no response from the police. Apparently, there was a statewide search for me. My family was down the road at the Hopi Motel, where the police had set up a base of operations. I pulled up my cell phone and tried calling my mom, but the thing was just a glass brick. No power, nothing. "Help!" I screamed to no avail. Since none of the bozo cops were paying attention to me, I decided to run to the motel myself and reunite with my parents. But as soon as I got a few feet from down the dusty highway, there was a bright flash, and I was suddenly running towards another rest stop in a heavily wooded area of the Northeast. A nearby sign proclaimed 10 miles to Burlington. Burlington? I had been before. It was in freaking Vermont. I had just traveled hundreds of miles in a millisecond. There were a few cars at this new rest stop, some families on a road trip. I yelled at them for attention, but they ignored me just like the cops did. "It won't matter." I spun around. Mikey was right behind me. I no longer got that tingly feeling when I saw him, but my mind burned with rage. "What the hell did you do?" I shoved him backwards, just like he did in Arizona. Mikey fell flat back. "I tried to warn you," he said teary-eyed. "What the hell is this? What's happening?" "You're stuck here," Mikey said, wiping his nose. "With me." "What do you mean stuck? At this rest stop?" "At all rest stops," Mikey said. "I've been here since 2009. Sometimes with other kids, and most of the time by myself. I don't know who came up with the name, but it's older than my time here. We call this place The Waiting." "The Waiting?" "Yeah, you can only visit rest stops. Anytime you try to leave one, you'll just end up at another one somewhere else in the country. Sometimes it's the next stop down the road. Sometimes it's clear across the country like here." I took a deep breath, hoping beyond all hope that this was just some horrible nightmare. I pinched myself, slapped my face, but I didn't wake up. And then I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my brain for the past 15 minutes. "Am I dead?" "I don't think so," Mikey said. "'Cause with a name like The Waiting, it sure sounds like I'm dead, waiting for the great beyond," I said. "It's not as simple as being a ghost," Mikey said. "Here, let me show you." He brought me to the rest stop building where a series of vending machines lay. The boy pressed a few buttons and an ice-cold Coca-Cola tumbled into the collection bucket. Mikey grabbed it and twisted the top. Fizz. He sipped some of the Coke and then offered it to me. "Try it. You can eat and drink anything you want. Nobody ever seems to notice when we take something." I took the Coke and made a tentative sip. It tasted just like the 20,000 or so that I had had before. "Did you pay?" "Nope, it's all free," Mikey said, grinning. "All you can eat, all you can drink." I gave the Coke back to him. So we can still interact with this world, just not any people. Yep, Mikey said. If the weather's bad at one rest stop, you just go to another where it's better. You can eat and drink whatever. There's always a working restroom nearby. You never grow fat or old. It's kind of like Neverland. Yeah, screwed up Neverland, I said. And then my eyes fell upon an ancient device that I had never even bothered to notice before. There were very few left in the world, but the fact that one was at this rest stop seemed to be a sign. It was a payphone. I ran over to it and grabbed the receiver. But when I put it to my ear, all I heard was an ear-splitting shriek of static. Ow! You can't call anyone, Mikey said. Believe me, I've tried many times, and this was back when payphones were everywhere. He chuckled. I hung up the phone, sighing, and then I remembered what had happened the moment before I had passed out. That giant rubbery hand that had grabbed me from behind. Mikey, I asked, who put us here? Mikey's smile vanished in an instant. Don't worry about them, he said. I won't let them touch us again. Them? The red Gumbies, Mikey said. The red what? Red Gumbies. We called them that because they wear these thick rubber suits that make them look like Gumby, only red. Blood red, Mikey said. Is that who grabbed me? A guy in a red rubber suit, I shivered. What did he do? Nothing. They only touched you, but I pulled you away before anything else could happen. Anything else? What do you mean by anything else? Mikey didn't answer. You had already passed out once they had touched you, which meant that you were now part of this world. But I could still keep us safe. I've gotten really good at losing the red Gumbies over the years. I pulled you into a nearby car and drove from one rest stop to another, then another and another, and so on, until I was certain that they had given up the chase. By then, I had ended up right back where I had started. So that's why I woke up in the backseat of a car, I asked. Yeah, Mikey said. Driving's the best way to lose them. What if they come back? I asked. We'll know if they're coming. The air gets really cold and you see this black tanker truck. No one notices the truck or the Gumbies except for us, and they're the only ones who can see us in the waiting. When you see that truck coming, dash, run, don't stop, don't look back. Just get to the next rest stop as fast as you can. What will they do if they take us? Mikey didn't respond. He stared at the horizon. Let's go somewhere down south. Somewhere warmer. Living in the waiting wasn't so bad, at least at first. Mikey and I stole as much junk food and as many sodas as our little bodies could handle. We would just punch in the number and the machine spat out anything that we wanted, free of charge. Pretzels, Sprite, M&Ms, Dr. Pepper, Snickers, Doritos. At the bigger truck stops, we could steal real food. Cooks would place whole meals on diner counters, and we would snatch them right in front of the wait staff. They never noticed. And Mikey was right. No matter how much we ate or drank, we never changed. We gained no weight, we never grew taller. We never aged, period. Aside from eating, we stole lots of cars and motorcycles. Land Rovers, Ford F-150s, Harley Davidsons, a Rolls Royce or two, even semi-trucks. At 15, I already had my learner's permit and had driven my father's Subaru a bunch of times, so I was somewhat well-versed in handling vehicles. But my stint in the waiting made me an expert. Having all the time in the world and so many cars available for the taking allowed me to learn all the ins and outs of anything with wheels and a motor. The first car that I stole in the waiting was a Corvette Z06. The driver had stepped out to throw up in the parking lot. Must have been car sick or maybe drunk driving. Either way, he left the driver's side door wide open. I jumped in and pulled out of the lot, tires screeching. "See you in hell, suckers!" I screamed as I drove away from the rest stop. The driver didn't notice. Drivers never noticed as we got behind the wheel. No cops ever stopped us either. It was exhilarating. For a few minutes at least. We couldn't drive more than a couple of 100 meters before that same bright flash brought us to another rest stop. And another rest stop, and another and another. The constant shift became disorienting and then nauseating. That's why Mikey often walked from one location to the next if we were traveling. Unless we needed to escape the Gumbies, of course. We usually slept in tents and sleeping bags, which we carried in heavy rucksacks like we were backpacking across the country. We stole the gear from a camper van at one of the rest stops. Sometimes we would sleep on benches or even on the ground if it was a warm night, staring up at the stars. They seemed to shine much brighter in the waiting. We mostly wore the same clothes, but there was always a bathroom available to wash up, and some rest stops even had showers. If a thunderstorm or a blizzard broke out, we would just head for a different rest area that had bright, sunny skies. We were the masters of our secret domain, answering to no one but ourselves, and our unseen enemy. And now and then I would ask Mikey about the red Gumbies, but he rarely elaborated on the subject other than to say, "Run." "I won't let them catch us again," Mikey said one day. "Is that what happened to the other kids in the waiting?" I asked. "The ones who are gone now. The red Gumbies got them." And Mikey nodded, solemn. "What do they want?" I asked. "Why take us?" Let's get some sleep, Dash," Mikey said, crawling into his sleeping bag. "We can discuss this another time." He said that a lot whenever I started digging into the Gumby subject. Anytime I brought them up, it triggered a great deal of anxiety in Mikey. I could only imagine how traumatic it had been to see dozens of other kids fall victim to these supernatural intruders over the years. Our freedom was fun, but it grew old, and time flew by. A month had already passed in the real world, but it felt like only a couple of days in the waiting. Everywhere we went, everything was rushed. The people, the cars, the weather. In and out and back on the road again. It was like our perception was tied to the liminal spaces that we now inhabited. "We call it life at high speed," Mikey said. "Everyone who becomes trapped here feels the same way. I'm surprised it's been almost 2 decades for me," he said. "I saw signs that my parents were searching for me, but I never saw them or anybody else that I knew. There were posters at the rest stop where I disappeared with a $50,000 reward for anyone who found me. I wondered if I could collect that money if I somehow made it out of the waiting. I really missed home, and I kept asking Mikey about ways to escape. What if we dug underground? You'll just end up underground at another rest stop. How about driving really fast, a pedal to the floor? I tried that, it did nothing. I'm hiding in the back of someone's car while they drive off. I tried that too." It seemed every idea that I came up with, no matter how outlandish, Mikey or one of his old companions had already tried it, and they got nowhere new. But I finally stumbled upon something that Mikey hadn't tried before. As we were eating eggs and bacon from a greasy spoon diner at a truck stop, a random thought popped into my head. "How do you know if you've been to every rest stop in the country?" I asked. Mikey paused a moment, sipping his coffee. "I mean, after all these years." "Yeah, but have you or any of the others ever created a map or a list of all the places?" I asked. Mikey scrunched up his face, thinking, and then he shook his head. We should make a map of all the rest stops in the waiting," I offered, "and check off each one that we visit." "Why do that?" "Well, 'cause maybe one of these places has a way out," I said, "or something else that could lead to a way out." "What makes you think there'd be anything like that?" Mikey asked. "I don't know," I said, pushing my scrambled eggs around the plate. I have no idea what we might find, but it'll give us a good starting point. My dad used to say, you never really know a place until you've mapped it out, whether it's uncharted territory or your own hometown. I think there's still more that you don't know about the waiting even after all these years, because you've never seen it all laid out before. Mikey finished his cup of coffee. A wide smile creased his face. From then on, Mikey and I had a mission. I tore down a missing persons poster with my face on it and used the back as a blank sheet to start our map. And we both stole some pens and pencils from a tourist info office in Colorado. I drew the map. I had a pretty decent hand from years of making my own little comics as a kid, while Mikey named each rest stop. The Great Waiting Map, as we called it, was a massive undertaking. We picked a single direction and kept going straight, stopping only to sleep and eat. There were thousands of rest stops to catalog, some of which Mikey had never seen before, or at least he couldn't even remember visiting them. At each location, I would draw a unique or notable feature: a Paul Bunyan statue at the entrance, a kiosk on coyotes, a busted vending machine, and show how it connected to nearby rest stops. Finding unique features was hard at most locations. We had to pick things like the number of parking spots or a funny-looking cactus near the facilities. I also learned a lot about people on this mission. We saw so many at the places we visited, from all walks of life. I realized that most of us have some level of anxiety, running behind on a trip, leaving something important back at home, work issues, relationship issues, and so on. Mostly I saw how lonely people were, whether traveling alone or in a large group on a tourist bus. Everyone was glued to their iPhones or tablets, lost in their own little world, just waiting to get to their next destination. Man, I really miss my folks, I told Mikey one day after we had stopped for a snack break at a rest stop in Kansas. I hated to think of them. I knew that my mom would be an absolute wreck. She grew paranoid if I texted her back a half hour late. And my dad was probably drinking himself into an early grave, blaming himself for letting me wander on my own at that big truck stop. They probably both feared the worst. You know, I can't even remember my parents, Mikey said. Like I know who they are, but I can't picture them anymore. When I try to picture their faces, it's just a blank. He looked at me teary-eyed again. You think they still miss me? Of course they do, I said, and they'll never forget you. They probably think about you every single day. Really, after all these years? Absolutely. I excused myself to go to the restroom and burst into a sob that lasted close to an hour. The map catalog was a slow, cumbersome process, but it felt good. It felt like we were getting somewhere, even though we didn't know the destination. This is pointless, Mikey said one day, looking worn down. The damn map will never end. Hey, there are only so many rest stops, I told him. And besides, each new one is another step closer to finding a way out. You still believe that? Mikey asked. Hey, there's no proof that we're stuck here, I said. For all we know, the next rest stop will show us a way out. Mikey just laughed. The next rest stop would be his last. It was a bright sunny day. Mikey and I had just arrived at a way station in the middle of the New Mexico desert, not far from Roswell. There were no cars in the lot, no people lounging around, nothing for miles in any direction. It was unusually cold for the location and the time of day. The last 4 rest stops that we had cataloged were in the desert, and each one was hotter than the last. Now I was practically shivering. Why is it so cold? I asked soon after we had arrived. We stopped behind a tiny adobe building to get out of the wind. It was the only building on the lot. Mikey was shivering even more than I. He looked around, wide-eyed. This isn't right," he said in a low voice, almost like a whisper. "Why, what is it?" I asked. Mikey's face grew ashen. "It's them." The cobalt blue sky suddenly darkened, as if a thin haze had settled over the atmosphere. In seconds, the midday sunlight turned into twilight darkness. I spun around. A vast, inky cloud filled the air. It rose from a jet-black semi-truck barreling down the highway. The truck appeared small at first, just a black blob on the horizon. But that blob grew bigger by the second. It was driving over 100 miles per hour. "Run!" Mikey shouted. We bolted for the opposite edge of the rest stop, and by now I could hear the animalistic growl of the truck's massive engine. We were almost at the property's edge, 10 steps away, and then the bright flash. Arriving at another desolate rest stop a dozen miles away, the sun was still shining, no inky menace in the bright blue skies. I welcomed the oppressive desert heat, feeling elated. But that elation disappeared the moment that I turned around. Mikey was gone. I was alone at the new rest stop. I should have kept running. It was what both of us had decided to do if the other were taken. "Don't stop, don't even look back," Mikey had said. "Just get to the next rest stop as fast as you can." But I couldn't keep going. Mikey had become my only friend left in the world, my lifeline to sanity. Perhaps I could still drag him with me into safety. I went back. Flash. It was pitch dark at the previous rest stop. "Mikey?" I called out. I could barely see the adobe structure amid all the thick black smoke from the tanker truck. But this didn't feel like regular smoke, the kind that scratches your throat and makes you cough. This smoke felt like cold mist and made me calm in a strange and sleepy way. "Mikey," I said again lower. The tanker truck's rumbling engine was so loud that it shook the ground. I was close to the vehicle, very close, too close. "Mike, are you there?" I whispered. And that's when I first saw them, flashes in the darkness. They intermittently appeared as smoke billowed around the oily truck. I stopped dead in my tracks, hiding behind a nearby trash can, peering at the strange visitors. There were 3 of them. Mikey was right. They looked a lot like Gumby, only much bigger and blood red. Their rubbery, humanoid shapes were all wobbly and misshapen. Were they wearing suits, or was that their skin? I wondered. It was hard to tell from the brief glimpses that I caught as the smoke moved in and out of the way. The Gumbies had their backs turned when I saw them. They crowded around Mikey, who lay face down on the asphalt beside the tanker truck, his eyes half-lidded. He didn't seem so frightened, more like confused or drugged. The red Gumbies grabbed a series of oily black tubes from the tanker truck's side. Each tube had an accordion shape, like you would see on an old vacuum. The strange beings placed these sucker ends of these accordion tubes on Mikey's body, his legs, his back, his head. Each tube connected with a loud and sudden noise. They attached a half-dozen of them to the helpless boy, and then one of the red Gumbies pulled a big greasy lever beneath the truck's tank. The tubes started wriggling like giant black worms. Mikey's body contorted as the tubes sucked something out of him. Blood, guts. I couldn't see what it was. Soon his body began to shrink, deflating like a balloon with tiny pinprick holes in it. Mikey groaned. His insides were melting away, disappearing into that big black tank atop the truck, becoming some sort of obscene fuel. "Stop!" I shouted. I said it without even thinking of the consequences. A reflex. A stupid decision. but I couldn't bear to watch my only friend left in the world die before me. All three Gumbies turned my way, and I finally got a good look at their faces. They were not wearing suits. Their heads were just big red rubber squares with no mouth or nose, only eyes that contained multitudes, writhing, infinite, eyes like miniature black holes. I could hardly look at them. Mikey and I shared a glance in that moment. The boy was barely conscious now, his body flattening against the pavement. "Run," he whimpered. Seconds later, he was nothing more than a pile of skin and clothes lying on the ground. I bolted in the opposite direction, headed for the edge of the rest stop. But before I made it to the property line, a pair of strong, rubbery hands grabbed my shoulders. One of the red Gumbies had snatched me. The creature's oily stench made me dizzy, and then the creature spoke inside my head, its voice like a humming radiator.
"Do you want to go home?"
it asked. I could only nod in agreement. Tears clouded my vision, my whole body was shaking.
"Then bring us another like you, and we'll grant you your freedom."
The creature pushed me forward. There was a bright flash and I fell on some warm desert sand and passed out. For a long, long time. I woke sometime later, days, months, years. I was at the same rest stop, only now it was a typical day again. Bright sunshine above, no black smoke, no tanker truck. The desert heat had returned. And so too had all the motorists, zipping along the highway, always in a hurry, oblivious to any cosmic horrors lurking on the horizon. I slowly got to my feet, dusting myself off. I searched the area for any lingering sign of Mikey, the black tanker truck, or the red Gumbies, but there was none. It was as if the whole experience had been some horrible nightmare.
"Bring us another like you."
Were they telling the truth? Would such an act really free me from this prison? I shuddered to think what those rubbery monsters would do to the new kid if I even found one. I stayed at that rest stop for days afterwards, not eating, barely drinking, and mostly crying. Would I simply die if I stopped doing anything, I wondered. Would my body turn into a dried up husk? Would it finally free me from this hell? But another stronger thought rose out of my depression. You have a map to finish, Dash. The great map of the waiting. Mikey and I had already cataloged over 300 rest stops, and there were many, many more to go. One of them might still be a way out. Instead of wallowing in despair, I plunged my remaining energy into continuing the map. I owed it to Mikey. If nothing else, I would leave behind a record of our time in this strange place for the next unfortunate soul to find themselves stuck here. Maybe it would help. I visited so many new places. I had to grab a stack of posters to continue building out the map, taping them together along the edges. It grew into this massive tapestry of drawings with so many crisscrossing lines that it looked like a madman's murder board. Even with my busy schedule, the loneliness never left. In fact, it only grew worse. There was no one to share in any of my latest discoveries. From a rest stop with the world's largest potato statue to one shaped like a giant alligator. I started talking to myself, pretending that Mikey was still there with me. This would be a good place to visit in the winter, right, Mikey? Wow, I've never seen a vending machine that only sold Fanta. We can see the Grand Canyon from here. Isn't that incredible? But no matter the view, it was never as exciting as seeing it with someone else. I was at a rest stop in upstate New York when it happened. Beautiful fall weather, an apple orchard grew nearby, not at the rest stop but right next to it. One of the tree's branches hung over the property line, and a big red, juicy apple dangled from its tip. It had been ages since I had last tasted fresh fruit. Everything had been processed junk food from a vending machine or a heavy meal from a greasy diner. I was on my tippy toes trying to snatch the fruit when I heard her soft voice. "Hey, are you Dash?" I fell over in shock, crushing my folded up map. When I looked up, I saw the prettiest girl that I had ever seen. She was about my age with long auburn hair and big brown eyes. It took me a moment to realize that she was actually looking at me and not through me like all the others. And then I became very self-conscious, smoothing my hair with my hands. "What?" I stammered. "Are you Dash Bowman?" the girl asked. She stayed put as if she didn't want to scare me away. "Yes," I said. "You can see me, hear me." The girl nodded. "I'm Trisha," she said. "I've seen you at a few rest stops before, and I've seen your poster." "Call the police, tell them," but I stopped myself. Tell the cops what? That I'm stuck in another dimension where tall rubber monsters suck the life out of kids, and only this girl can see me. No one would believe that story. Even I had trouble believing it. "It's okay," Trisha said. "I've seen others like you." "Others like me?" I asked. "Ghosts," Trisha said. "But I'm not a ghost," I said. I could still eat, I could still drink and piss and shit, but that wouldn't make any sense to her. This girl was looking at me the same way that I looked at Mikey at that fateful truck stop in Arizona. A lost soul. "You said you've seen others like me," I asked. "Yes, like at rest stops." I hadn't even noticed the chill in the air yet. "No," Trisha said, "but sometimes when I'm at certain places, they come to me, seeking help." "What happened to these other ghosts?" I asked. It had grown darker. Was the sun setting already? "I helped them remember who they were and where they came from," Trisha explained, "so they can find peace." It was much colder now. Black smoke curled into the sky. The tanker truck was on its way, barreling toward the rest stop.
Bring us another like you.
Trisha was still watching me, waiting for me to respond. I didn't have to do anything. My job was already complete. Somehow I had lured in another victim. All I had to do was wait for them to arrive and then...
And we'll grant you your freedom,
the red Gumbies had said. But how could anyone trust them? A terrifying thought occurred to me then. Those creatures had almost certainly made the same promise to Mikey before my arrival, and they had probably promised the kid before him and the kid before, and so on. All those lonely children desperate for a way home. There's no way those monsters would honor such a promise, even if it were possible. They were too greedy. They only wanted more fuel no matter who it was. And if there was ever someone who didn't deserve to be fuel, it was a kind soul like her. "Listen, Trisha, I'm not like the others," I said, backing away from her. "I don't need your help. Go back to your family, get out of here. Forget you ever saw me." "What?" Trisha walked towards me. "You just asked me to call the police moments ago." "You don't understand, I'm not like the others," I said. There was a loud hiss. Air brakes. The tanker truck had just pulled into the rest stop. Cold mist like smoke filled the area. But Trisha noticed none of this. It was still a bright autumn day to her. "I want to help you," she said. I could see the blood-red crown of one of the Gumby's rubbery heads bobbing behind the rest stop building, headed our way. "You can't help. Get away from me." But Trisha kept moving closer, worried. "What's wrong?" Trish, a man's voice called out. "Are you still in the bathroom? We gotta go." "Is that your dad?" I asked. "Go to him, get out of here now." "Oh, he's always fussing over nothing," Trisha said. "My parents hover over me too much." I groaned. This was getting nowhere. I needed to do something else if I were to save this girl from my fate. Something drastic. Just as those long rubbery legs appeared from behind the rest stop, a new idea shot into my head. A crazy one. I handed my folded up map to Trisha. "Here, take this. Tell my parents that I love them." My heart leapt when I realized that Trisha could hold the map. Perhaps I could get a message out to the world after all. But there was no time now. All three Gumbies had rounded the corner of the rest stop building. I ran headlong towards them. "This way," I shouted. "Where are you going?" Trisha asked. I ducked beneath one of the creature's long legs as I ran around the side of the truck stop. All three Gumbies turned in my direction away from Trisha, who was probably super confused by now. I kept looking over my shoulder at the tall rubbery monsters, making sure that they were following me. They didn't seem angry or scared, more curious than anything else. I ran beneath a kiosk, squeezed between some parked cars, and then across the parking lot and beelined for one vehicle, the black tanker truck. By now, the red Gumbies were running after me. I had their full attention, but it was too late to abandon the mission. I had to finish it, whether it ended in failure or success. I could see the creatures gaining on me reflected in the truck's side window. No time to hesitate, no second guessing. I pulled the driver's side door handle. Click, it was unlocked. Yes, I had a feeling that it would be. Why would such monsters ever bother to lock their vehicle when they knew the terror that they struck in their victims? No one would be stupid enough to try. No one except for me. The heavy metal door swung wide as I climbed into the truck. "Please be here, please be here." I searched the cabin. It appeared normal. There was the speedometer, a CB radio, and an ignition switch. But it was empty. Shit. I slammed the door shut and locked it moments before the Gumbies arrived. And then I continued searching for the key. There had to be a spare somewhere. I checked behind the visor, in the glove compartment, the center console. 3 loud bangs. One of the Gumbies slammed a fat, rubbery hand on the side window. I could tell that it was angry, its black hole eyes sore and bleeding. I heard screams issuing from inside the monster's head. Human screams. The sounds were awful, but I couldn't let them distract me. I reached down onto the driver's side mat.
Help me.
A familiar voice pleaded. It was Mikey's voice, coming from within the red Gumby's head.
You'll destroy me if you leave. You'll destroy us all.
There was another chorus of ear-splitting screams. More banging on the windows. All 3 Gumbies surrounded the truck cabin trying to get in. They were desperate now. It had to be in here somewhere. I felt beneath the driver's seat, and my fingers grabbed something small, cold, and metal. A key. Success. I jammed it into the ignition, turning it over. The engine rumbled to life, vibrating my seat. Aha! I looked at the Gumbies still trying to claw their way inside. "So long," I screamed. Then I stretched my leg to reach the brake and pressed hard on it as I shifted the gear into drive. My childhood dream of being a truck driver had come to life. I pushed down on the accelerator, and the truck jolted forward, leaving the red Gumbies behind, leaving the whole rest stop behind. I strained to pull the massive steering wheel, bringing the tanker truck onto the highway. It was a straight road with dense forest on either side. Barely any traffic, but that didn't matter. The truck just barreled straight through all other cars on the road like a ghost. I kept my foot down on the accelerator. I was already a mile from the truck stop, something that would have been impossible on foot. I've done it, I thought. I'm finally leaving the waiting. But the highway soon transformed into a white asphalt road, running through a black, frozen desert. There were no other cars on this strange path, no rest stops, no exits, no gas stations or fast food restaurants, no sign of civilization, period. I'm still on that highway now, searching for an exit, any exit, a way out, a way home. It's nighttime here, but there's no moon, and there are no stars, just inky blackness overhead, with the occasional wisp of icy clouds. The tanker truck's yellow headlights provide meager illumination, revealing an endless landscape of desolation. A cold wind whips across the black dunes on either side of the white road, whipping up tufts of sand like rays. I don't know if I've been driving for 40 minutes or 40 years. This road is endless. At times, I pull over and I shut the engine off. I wondered if I should have just carried on with their game, let the red Gumbies have their new victim, let them drain me of everything. All the memories of my parents, my family, my friends, school, road trips, Mikey, even my memories of the waiting, all turned into fuel. Perhaps they would have drained all the pain, the anxiety, the depression, the loneliness. But those thoughts only last for a moment. I shed a few tears and then banished them, and I'm back on the road again, driving towards a destination unknown. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Now, we all know that finances can get stressful. At times, you don't even want to look at your accounts at all. Subscriptions, random charges, stuff that you definitely forgot that you signed up for. Subscriptions, random charges, stuff that you definitely forgot that you signed up for. It all adds up fast. So to help with that, I started using Rocket Money, and it made things way easier to actually stay on top of everything. It tracks all your subscriptions in one place, and it can help you cancel the ones that you don't want anymore in just a few taps. And get this, Rocket Money has helped users save over $880 million in canceled subscriptions. It also automatically categorizes your spending so that you can actually see where your money's going to. For me, it was eating out, way more than I thought. And being able to set budgets and get alerts for big transactions honestly helped me feel back in control. Plus everything, checking, savings, bills, it's all in one dashboard so you're not jumping between apps trying to figure things out. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. Sometimes life takes a left turn. It can happen so abruptly that weeks later you're still not sure that it happened. My life took a turn like that last autumn. What I didn't know was that it would keep turning, making that left turn into a spiral that sent me to the brink of madness. I come from a close-knit family. We were raised in Sioux Falls, but we moved after my dad lost his job. There was me, my younger sister Jody, and my big brother Alan. Despite us taking very different paths in life, the three of us were always close. Long after my parents retired and moved to the West Coast, we stayed behind. My sister pursued a legal career as a prosecutor, while I got a job working on the power grid. Alan got a managing job at a bottling plant. For years, we lived close to one another, having dinner once a week and celebrating the big holidays at my sister's place. It was the kind of relationship where I might have had a rough day at work and would know exactly who to call about it. I was having one of those days, a late September night last year. I tried calling Jody about it, but she wouldn't pick up. It wasn't unusual. She would always forget her cell phone in her car. I decided to pick up some takeout and drop by her place. When I got there, her door was locked. I looked in one of the windows and I could see that the lights were on. There was no car in the driveway, so I was a bit confused. Using my backup key, I opened the front door, only to see my brother Alan in the hallway holding a bloody knife. He turned to me with tears coming down his face. "Call the police," he cried. "Please, call the police." Once the police got there, life took that left turn at a brisk angle. Alan was taken into custody. My parents flew in overnight. I saw the police strip Jody's home apart and place the pieces into evidence bags as investigators cataloged their lives. The working theory was that Alan was involved with some bad people who had asked him to influence his prosecutor sister to drop a case. Most of it was circumstantial. I had to juggle daily updates and demands from a dozen directions. I was going to have to testify, there was no doubt about it. I would have to tell them exactly what I saw and what happened that night. I didn't know what to think. Alan swore his innocence, but I had seen something in his eyes, a tiny spark of darkness just behind the tears. Maybe him being a murderer wasn't the whole truth, but I don't think it was a complete lie. As you can imagine, I was in a dark place. I was reeling from losing my sister, but I had to come to terms with the fact that I was about to lose a brother as well. And somewhere in all of that, I had to make sure that I didn't lose myself along the way. Now, I only touched on this briefly, but I have a pretty important job. Important, but ultimately dull. I work in the energy sector. The technical term for my role is Grid Reliability Analyst. I track how power is used to provide reliability reports and investigate outages in relation to equipment failure and weather. I'm part of a team that works with spotting inconsistencies and setting up maintenance plans. Most of my job is spent at our office, measuring and predicting patterns. Whenever something goes wrong, we can point to when, why, and where. We have plenty of people to report to, and I'll be the first to admit that this job can be duller than a rock on the best of days. But that's the thing with maintenance. You want it to be dull. It's when it's exciting that you have a problem. After taking some time off, I got back to work. I couldn't stand the quiet of staying home. My boss decided to cut down on my hours until after the trial, which was still a couple of weeks away. I had to beg him to get anything to do at all. He had decided to give me something that had been on his desk for a while, but that he hadn't had the chance to prioritize. Something that he wouldn't mind me messing up. So, there was this thing that we had for internal review for a while. There's this particular area of the state where residents have reported minor brownouts. Not complete power outages, but instances where voltages would suddenly dip. Not enough for the streetlights to go dark, but enough to reset the timer on your microwave. An inconvenience at most. These brownouts followed a sort of pattern, but they weren't mechanical. We couldn't identify any equipment failure, and the time would differ by a matter of hours, sometimes days. It had been going on for a little over 2 months, but nobody was taking it seriously. It was happening in an area where a little less than 200 people lived, so it wasn't exactly at the top of the list. This was the job handed to me as a sort of busy work. I got it with a do-what-you-can kind of attitude. I think my boss, along with my coworkers, sort of figured this was a temporary thing that would fix itself over time. And I mean, I could see why they thought so. But they were wrong. The problem affected several substations. It wasn't mechanical in nature, and it wasn't the result of hardware failure. That was the first thing we had checked. Instead, it seemed to follow an irregular pattern. And by measuring the times when the brownout struck our substations, I managed to triangulate a rough area of origin, a space just outside the town of Hilltop. I figured we might be looking at someone leeching off the grid, but they'd have to be pretty advanced to do it at this level. It was nice to get out of the office and do some legwork for once. I lived out of my car for a couple of days, going from substation to substation, talking to maintenance workers. I rarely get to flex the kind of authority that we have, so it was kind of empowering to show off my case binder and be the "I'm the one asking the questions here" kind of guy. More often than not, we're punching bags, having to answer questions about why there are power outages during storms. Yeah, I've written reports on it. By golly, if only there was a way to predict the relationship between tall trees, harsh storms, and power lines. But this case was a bit different. I didn't get that far, so I decided to do a little digging outside my usual boundaries. I drove out to that area to see for myself what exactly we were dealing with. I drove around for a bit, stopping to ask some of the locals about the brownouts. A lot of them had noticed it. One of them had even called us about it a couple of months prior. It always happened on the weekend, and it usually only lasted for a few minutes. But that's as far as I got. A dead end. There were no strange shacks set up in the fields, no illegal cables being run from the power lines, and nothing like that. I was about to give up when I stopped at the local gas station for a refill. Now, here's a trick that I've learned. If you want to know what's happening in a small town, ask the guy at the convenience store or the gas station. They see when people pull up at strange hours of the day, or whoever's buying the weird pack of condoms when their spouse is out of town. On a hunch, I asked if they had noticed anything unusual around the time of the brownouts. The guy behind the counter, a 17-year-old with black hair covering his triple lip piercing, shrugged it off. People rarely stop on the weekends," he said. "Except for like one guy. He always gets a Hershey bar." Curious, I asked about this weird guy who had kept stopping by. I made some notes and cross-referenced the dates with the brownouts. The guy working the counter could personally attest to this person having stopped by at least 6 times, and every time correlated with a brownout. It might have been a coincidence, but it was something. And there was one more thing. He drove a van. It was around this time that I got the trial date, and got an email about it while I was writing my notes for the report. It was short notice, a couple of weeks. It felt like a gut punch, turning my blood into ice. Like reality came knocking on the door, reminding me that I wasn't a cool secret agent. I was a sad middle child whose family was bursting at the seams. But I had a job to do, and yes, it wasn't a big deal. I was way overplaying my hand. But I had to keep myself busy or I'd spend the next 2 weeks staring at my shower wall, trying not to dry heave. This was my way of dealing with things, and I'd be damned if I just let it go because of an email. I could, but I wouldn't. Instead, I waited until the following weekend. The patterns were lining up and I figured I would see for myself. That Saturday, I planned an honest-to-God stakeout from my car. It wasn't as exciting as it sounds, but I had an audiobook to keep me company. I don't even remember what it was. I just needed a fresh voice in my head to keep the anxiety out. I almost forgot what I was there for when, later that evening, I spotted a van rolling into the gas station. There was a man in a white hoodie and a black baseball cap with his hands in his pocket. I watched as he got him some gas and bought himself a Hershey bar. The teenager behind the counter had been right. There had only been a handful of people who had stopped by all day. This guy was an exception. Now I know that I overstepped my boundaries. I'm not a cop or a government agent. Most of my work is administrative. But at this point I was curious and I wanted a final answer. What the hell was this guy up to? I followed him at a distance. I don't think he noticed. He took a left turn out past a dirt road leading into a space between 2 farmlands. I kept going forward until he was out of sight and then turned the car around. I parked down the road, called up some of the folks at the office and waited. If my calculations were correct, we would be looking at a brownout shortly. After about 20 minutes, something happened. I was expecting maybe some flickering lights. What I wasn't expecting was interference with battery-powered devices. My phone got disconnected along with my car stereo. My battery stalled, but only for a minute or so. Once everything came back online, my colleagues confirmed it. Readings had dropped sharply in that area. Suspicions confirmed. I got out of the car and walked down the dirt road, keeping my phone close. I needed answers. The guy had parked in a small space between two farms. There was a small dip in the road causing rainwater from the previous night to pool a little, making the solid dirt into a muddy manure-smelling slugfest. He must have been an idiot driving down this road. There was no way he wouldn't get stuck. And lo and behold, when I spotted him, his van was spinning tires. He wasn't going anywhere. I walked up to the passenger side and knocked on the window. The skinny face of a man in his late 20s popped up, looking over the edge of a pair of thin glasses. For a moment, he seemed to weigh whether to be angry or terrified. He settled on the ladder and pressed the gas pedal harder, digging himself further down. "You're not getting out anytime soon," I said, knocking again. "You're gonna need something for traction." "Go away," he called back. "I'm with transmission operations," I said. "I got some questions about your power usage." That shut him up. He pushed down on the gas one last time, but we could both hear the spin of the tire going lower and lower. He was gonna have to get out, and he was going to need my help. Even through the door, I could hear him sigh. He got out and faced me. We were about the same length, but I had a good 50 pounds on him. Something about his appearance made me think of a goat, like his nose was too far down his face. His oversized glasses seemed to agree, as he had to constantly push them back up. "You care to tell me how and why you're causing these outages?" I asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, looking for something loose to cram under his tire. I waved my binder at him. "I got the charts," I said, "and right now I'm just asking questions. But I might have to send somebody else to ask those questions if you're not inclined to answer." "You do that," he nodded. "Sounds fun." He broke off a plank from a fence and stuck it under his back tire. That ought to be enough to give him a boost. I shrugged him off and stepped back to take a picture of his license plate. That made him snap to attention. "You can't do that." "It's a free country." "Yeah, but my car sure as shit ain't." He stepped back out and walked up to me, facing me head on. He was all bark, no bite, and I could tell it from a mile away. "If you want to give me a ticket, then give me a ticket. I ain't got time for this. Though I'm sure the sheriff will be glad to help you with that." "You got nothing." "I got evidence of you messing with the power grid," I said, tapping my binder. "That carries a lot of charges and a couple hefty fines." "Well, that's not my fault," he groaned. "I ain't doing that." I rolled my eyes and stepped back. I had had enough of our back and forth. "You can argue that in court." All of a sudden, his face dropped. Every hint of a smile died and a panic welled up. I could see it even in the dim moonlight. He stammered a little and followed me a couple of steps. "Now hold on," he said. "I'm sure we can work something out." "I don't do bribes." "What about proof? You do proof." I stopped and turned. He held his arms out in a shrug. "It ain't my fault. If I show you, you can't do anything, right?" Not quite what I expected, but it was a start. I wasn't about to get into a stranger's van, so I stayed at a safe distance. When he opened those doors, it was like looking into another world. There was a computer set up with a 90s-style satellite dish roughly bolted to the floor. I could see a couple of cameras, some snacks, and about a dozen cables running to a handful of machines right behind the driver's seat. and in bold neon letters just above his computer were the words, "No future." To his credit, at least it was clean. "I'm doing a calibration," he said. "That's evidence." Evidence of what? Evidence that I'm not the one doing this. Just look, all right. He got the Hershey bar from his pocket, moved up to his computer, and entered a 6-digit passcode. A blinking command prompt showed up. He put on a cheap sun-faded headset and adjusted his microphone, and then he spoke out loud. "A query," he said, his cadence slow and clear. "Am I going to eat this Hershey bar?" I heard a bleep from my phone as the battery complained. The screen flickered. Seconds later, 3 symbols appeared on the screen. I-97. "That means yes to a probability of 97%, he continued. He opened his Hershey bar and took a big bite out of it, nodding at me. "But you caused the outage," I said. My phone buzzed again. "No, I asked a question," he argued. "The system I connected to, now that's the culprit." "And what system is that?" "You tell me, I didn't make it." "Who the hell did? What is this?" He finished his Hershey bar and wiped his hands on his jeans. He rolled the question on his tongue for a bit before giving me a shrug. "Honestly, I'm about as lost as you are." He introduced himself as Kibble. He described himself as a digital finance enthusiast, running a service called No Future. Apparently, he sold financial advice online under the guise of being able to predict the stock and crypto market. "Sure," he said as he wandered around the back of the van. "I can take my own advice and earn some bucks in a couple of months, but it's way faster to just get paid for sharing advice. All the cash and none of the risk." "You sure that's legal?" "Well, technically it's not financial advice," he corrected himself. "I'm a soothsayer. I sell predictions like a psychic." "You're a crypto psychic." "Oh shit, that's a much cooler title." He tapped the sign, letting the neon flicker a little. "I'm not lying about this part though. I know future, it works. I don't know how, but it does." "How can you not know how it works?" "Because it's some satellite shit, alright. I got the login info from an estate sale. A 70s tech wizard type stuff. And that's what's causing the outage. Satellites. I told you it ain't me." I helped Kibble get his van out of the mud. I got a chance to take a closer look at his gear. His setup was very basic. An old desktop computer running Windows XP hooked up to a car battery. All the system needed to do was run the equivalent of a localized search, so it didn't require a lot. But interacting with the system was so volatile that it would fry his computer every 3 or 4 prompts, forcing him to get new hardware frequently. And that's why he drove out to the middle of nowhere. He was hoping not to damage any other electronics. Once Kibble got talking, it was hard to get him to stop. You gotta ask simple questions, yes and no binary stuff. You have to relate it to a person, and you gotta ask it about something that hasn't happened yet. That's impossible. I'd invite you to try, but you wouldn't want to cause another critical power failure, would you? He let the words hang in air quotes. I considered it. And the outage wasn't particularly harmful, and I was getting curious. I decided to humor him. "Why'd you prompt it about the Hershey bar?" I asked. "Calibration," Kibble said. "I'm always gonna eat the Hershey bar, and it's a way to see the indexer hasn't drifted to a worse slice. 97% is as good as it gets." I deliberated what to prompt it. Something related to a person, a binary answer, something in the future. All my thoughts had centered around my brother, but I didn't trust this guy for a second. It had to be something impersonal but measurable. I had an idea. "Ask it if I'm going to see a dog tomorrow," I said. "Prompt that." "That's it?" He laughed. "Out of all possible questions, that's what you want to know. Just ask it." "Fine, but then you get off my back." He went through the procedure again, 6-digit login, adjusting his headset. Didn't you need my name? I asked. It understands context. He turned to the computer and spoke out loud. Query: will the person next to me see a dog tomorrow? The lights flickered again, my phone beeped, and this time something popped inside the van like a burst light bulb. The screen showed 3 symbols. I-97. And then the screen turned dark. Kibble spat and swore as he ran up to check the cables. The computer was as expected, fried. It says yes, 97% accuracy, he said. It's basically guaranteed unless you affect the outcome. So I'm gonna see a dog tomorrow, that's happening. It looks like it. Even if I actively avoid it. What can I tell ya? It points to yes. Trust the process. With that, Kibble and I called it a night. He drove off and I was left standing there with an expression on my face that could only be described as puzzled. I felt like I had gotten scammed. I checked the area for loose cables or something, but I couldn't find anything that pointed to him actively leeching off the power in the area. Maybe this system that he was interacting with was really the cause, but there was no way to know. And coming home that night, I lay awake wondering what I would have asked if I had another chance. It all came back to questions about Alan. Was he going to get convicted? Would he face the death penalty? Was he even guilty to begin with? I couldn't stop running the questions back and forth, picturing the stupid neon sign above Kibble's workstation. No future. The next day I stayed inside. I had decided that I was going to try not to see a dog. I was actively going to try and avoid the prediction of his machine just to see if I could. I wasn't feeling all that well anyway. My parents were constantly updating me with info from the trial, begging me to speak to the lawyer to prep for my brother's defense. They were adamant about him being innocent. I couldn't tell them the honest truth and that I wasn't sure. The stress of it all almost gave me stomach ulcers. I spent most of the day indoors watching old TV shows and clearing out my cupboard. I had some beef noodles and I fell asleep on the couch, putting my phone on mute. It wasn't until later in the evening when I heard a car horn that I got up. Turns out when you don't answer your parents, they come knocking. I won't bore you with the details of our conversation. They were there to discuss the trial and to scold me for turning off my phone. But what was peculiar about that encounter was something that they had brought along. It turns out they were dog sitting for a friend. What are the odds? Well, 97%, I suppose. I was gonna have to talk to Kibble again. He agreed to meet me at a Waffle House later that week. I offered to buy him dinner and he warned me that he wasn't holding back. He was getting all the bells and whistles and an extra portion for later. Strange behavior for someone who considered themselves a financial genie. Kibble was wearing the same kind of hoodie but not the same one. It looked a bit newer. He probably had a bunch of them. Kibble seemed to know the guy working at the counter and they stopped to chit-chat for a solid 5 minutes before he sat down at my table. Once he did, he seemed a little more relaxed than we last spoke. "Oh, don't tell me," he said. "You saw a dog." "I did." "You were trying not to, but you did." "Yeah, that's right." He slapped his hands together and grinned, pointing at me, and he nodded. "I told you it works. No future, my man, no future." "I have a couple questions to ask about your computer," I said. "It's personal and very important." "Well, what do I get out of it?" "First, I'm not turning you in, and second, I help you find an isolated spot where you don't reset any DVD players. People still got DVD players. The DVD, microwave, Blu-ray, or VCR isn't the point. The point is that you can't go messing with people's electronics. I can help you find a spot." "Go on." It was a fair deal. This would stop the brownouts and it would allow him to work unimpeded. I just had to find a blind spot. It wasn't that difficult, but it would probably be way out in the weeds. But first, I had to get some answers. And Kibble told me a little bit about himself in between his massive waffle servings. He was a computer science major who had to drop out to care for his dad. Once his dad passed, he had inherited a bunch of debt. Most of the estate had to go up for auction. The only thing he managed to save was a couple of old boxes of work stuff. He used to work with a guy who was into computers back in the late 70s, Kibble explained. That guy worked with a group at Stanford. They had access to some strange shit, and some of it was boxed away with Dad's things. For the first time, Kibble looked a bit uncomfortable. He lowered his voice. I know enough to work with it, but I'm telling you, this shit is weird. I tried running some diagnostics and it's like you can't even tell what it is. Some kind of hard drive, but it's bigger than anything I've seen. And it contains magic future data. No man, it contains noise. It's like radiation, random shit. Well then how do you use it? Honestly, I barely do anything. I got an algorithm that takes as big a chunk as it's allowed to and checks for patterns. It just works. That's it. He munched down on another waffle, shrugging my question off. That's it. I have to calibrate it every now and then and it just works. A vast majority of Kibble's predictions had come true, but they hadn't hit it big yet. While some stock and coin had increased and decreased as predicted, it hadn't been as dramatic as he had hoped. While he had earned enough to keep going, he wasn't expecting a big payout anytime soon. Giving trading tips under the guise of being an insider genius had earned him more than investing ever did, and he was closing in on enough cash to buy his dad's house. But for now, he had to keep working. I didn't say too much about what I needed to ask his computer. I wasn't sure myself. I had to get some clarity about Alan and the case, but how to form that question was another thing entirely. Kibble didn't need to know the details. He seemed genuinely curious, but I tried not to let him know too much. That following weekend, I showed him a space where he could work unhindered. There's this valley spot just southwest of the Runalong River where there is no arable land. At worst, we would be inconveniencing a couple of hikers, but it would require a 30-minute walk. Kibble wasn't too happy about that, but he had a setup that was meant to be portable. I had to drag the satellite dish though. We waited until late in the afternoon and made our way down the trail. Kibble had the computer in a backpack along with a power supply and a couple of backup drives. I carried the dish and a bag of cables just in case a couple got fried. My forearms were burning up just after 5 minutes of walking, and I was sweating through my clothes after 5 more. But we were getting there. Crossing the river while carrying electronics wasn't a big hit though, but we made it. Along that trail there is a field. According to my calculations, it was the perfect spot. We set up the computer and the power source on a big flat rock. Putting down the satellite dish felt like completing some kind of cosmic repentance, like I had purified myself in biblical labor. No way I was carrying it back. Kibble hooked it all up and input the 6-digit code. The satellite dish hummed a little as blue texture noise flickered against the black backdrop of the screen, spreading outward like a pixelated sunflower. Kibble ran a couple of pre-made scripts that in turn set up a blank prompt window. He handed me the headset. Now, before you say anything, I gotta make sure you understand how it works, he said. It's gotta be a yes or a no kind of deal. Something relating to a person. Something that hasn't happened yet. If you tell me what it is, I can come up with a question for you that works. I got it, I said. If you wouldn't mind, I need some space. Kibble rolled his eyes and wandered a bit further down the path, leaving me on my own. I put on the headset and adjusted the microphone. I could hear the static of my breath reflected back to me through the cheap plastic. I had seen him do this. I could do it. Query, I said. The system woke up. A static reflection of my voice echoed back to me as the word appeared on screen. It was listening, but how? It didn't matter. I asked the first thing that came to mind. Will my testimony put my brother on death row? The words appeared and the system chugged. I waited for the 3 symbols to appear, but nothing happened. I waited for a couple of seconds and then I took the headphones off. "Kibble," I called out. "It's not working." I could hear the computer chugging along, but it wasn't doing anything. Kibble came jogging back, calling out to me. "What did you ask it?" I asked about a verdict, a court case. "What about a court case?" Like if my testimony will change the outcome. And Kibble came up to me, scratching his head. "So you asked if your involvement would change the outcome of the verdict," he mumbled. Hold on, that's a self-referential event." "So you did that too with the Hershey bar." "Yeah, but my outcome doesn't change when I know it. I'll eat the damn thing anyway. Same with the dog, you were gonna see it no matter what. But for this, hold on." He scratched his head, looking at the screen. The computer was still humming, the lights were blinking, but nothing was being shown. "It's a loop," he said. "It's stuck in a loop. Giving you an answer would change the outcome, forcing it to recheck the calibration. It's gonna throw an error." And then, like clockwork, it did. The background changed to a sharp blue, and then a black square as if trying to show every symbol at once, and then a barrage of text, code, line after line after line, all ending with 100%. Dozens, hundreds. Kibble turned pale. "That's impossible, it's all outcomes, all of them." "What?" Kibble hurried up to the computer and pulled the plug. That didn't stop the symbols from running down the screen, line by line by line. "Nothing ever gets 100%. Kibble muttered. "It can't. It's impossible." I blinked. Something was wrong. I thought back on that night, the keys in the door, the click of the lock. But this time when I opened it, it wasn't Alan standing there. I was. I'm holding the knife. I looked down at Jody. Behind me, the front door opened and I turned around to see Alan. "Call the police," I cried. "Please, call the police." Looking back down, it's not Jody on the floor. It's my mother. I blink and it's my father. And then it's me. I'm lying in a pool of blood looking up at my sister standing over me with a knife. And then at my brother. The knife changes and I do too. Brother, mother, father, me, a kitchen knife, a bread knife, steak knife, a cut across my throat, a cut across theirs. In one breath we're wrestling over the living room couch, and in the next she's standing in the street screaming for help, trying to hold her insides in place. I'm stabbed in the gut crying out for help. I'm standing at the door calling the police. I'm holding the knife not knowing what to say. Call the police, please call the police. Sometimes there's another person there. Sometimes it's someone that I know, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes they flee out the back just before the front door opens. Sometimes it's my knife, sometimes it's theirs, but there is always a knife. I'm standing over her, plunging the knife into her stomach. That time I was angry, another time I'm sad. Sometimes as I die, I forgive him, or her, and sometimes I don't. But I'm always scared, always dying. 100 voices speak out to me at once, on the floor, from the kitchen, from the door. "It's a loop," they say. "It's all coming true." For a moment, I can feel grass on my face. I see Kibble in the distance, smacking the side of an old screen, trying to get something to reset. He's screaming, but the noise just echoes back into another dying victim. I'm holding my stomach. There's blood. I'm holding my breath. No, I can't breathe. I'm laughing. I'm crying. Then we're sitting on the couch, just Jody and me. In that one instance where everything went as planned and we shared a box of takeout food, just a long workday coming to an end. Where she opened the door and that was that. No left turns, straight roads ahead. The canvas texture of her cheap living room couch brushes against my fingertips. The condensation from my drink leaves a spot on her table. I forget to use a coaster. And then something burns in me, something blue and then black. A square, every symbol at once. Error, error, error. The TV catches fire, the takeout box is razor blades. We strangle, burn, cut, scream. On the floor, in the hallway, in 100 places, in 100 ways. I'm killing, being killed, and watching it at the same time as figures blend from one to the other, as a perfect amalgamation of possibilities emerge into blending, bleeding figure. The average of outcomes of all we could have been and done. Killer, witness, victim. I'm killing me as I watch. It looks like me and her and him and the others. There is so much blood. Please, call the police. Something slaps me. It takes a couple of seconds for my eyes to uncross. There are so many faces, but they end up looking like Kibble. He is sweating like a pig standing above me. I'm in the grass and he's shaking and eating a Hershey bar. The world slowly grows solid. Apparently all it took for the system to reset was recalibration. A Hershey bar. Kibble sat down next to me, wiping his forehead. Holy shit, he wheezed. Holy shit, it worked. What did you... Before I finished my sentence, something stung me. I touched my stomach with my hand and drew back a little blood. I had a cut on my stomach, nothing big. You didn't ask it right, Kibble said. I told you, you have to do it right. I gotta know, I whispered. I gotta know who did it. It took some convincing, but I made Kibble ask a final query. This one didn't turn out all that bad. If I testify against my brother, will my sister's killer face justice? I got a straight answer. 94%. It's almost a certainty. But can you accept those odds when it comes to murder? I'm not sharing what it said. That's for me and my brother to know. Just know that it was certain. Kinda. My father had a seizure on that night and almost ran himself and Mom off the road. My brother got taken to the infirmary after some kind of psychotic break. And when I had my moment in court, I lied to the jury. I said that I saw some things that I didn't. In the end, that's what got him convicted. I had to do it. The scar on my stomach healed, but it still hurts when I think about it. Not a physical pain, not an imagined one either. Not a pain at all, really. It's more like a memory of something. Sometimes I can look down and imagine a knife plunging into my gut. Sometimes I'm the one holding the knife. It's like there's a part of me that's still processing the result. Looping. As far as I know, Kibble is still working on No Future. I think he got the house by now. He's not answering my calls, and I think that's for the best. Whatever he's working with isn't natural, or maybe it's more natural than I'm comfortable with. I think I've heard somewhere that perceiving something can change the outcome. Maybe there's something to that. Not only when looking at the future, but at things that were. I've done what I had to do and said what I needed to say. I know for sure what really happened. If the outcome has changed since, that's not my fault. I'm not a killer, not a victim, and 94% is not a certainty. I don't care if the ache never goes away. I know my future. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. You ever notice how money stress just kind of creeps into everything? Like it's not just about paying bills, it's in the back of your mind when you're trying to relax, when you're trying to sleep, or even when you're just having a normal conversation. I've definitely had moments where I felt completely overwhelmed, trying to figure it all out. Like you're doing your best, but it still feels like you're behind somehow. And that kind of stress sticks with you more than you realize. That's why I think it's important to talk about the mental side of it. A therapy isn't about somebody telling you what to do with your money. It's about working through the stress, the anxiety, and even the shame that can come with it. It can help you understand your relationship with money and build better ways to handle that pressure. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. They'll match you with a licensed therapist based on a short questionnaire, and if it's not the right fit, you can switch anytime. With over 30,000 therapists and millions of people served, you're not alone in this, and a lot of people have found it genuinely helpful. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/Mr. Creeps. That's better, HELP.com/Mr. Creeps. A little over a month ago, I went to the cornfield, a place that feels almost suspended in time. It lies a few hours north of my village, tucked deep beyond the forest that climbs the lower slopes of the mountains in Sulawesi, Indonesia. The air there is cool and crisp, often carrying the faint scent of wet soil and pine from the highlands. My family has been planting corn in that same patch of land for as long as anyone can remember. My grandfather before my father and my father before me. Every year when the stalks turn gold and the wind rustles through them like a whispering sea, someone from the family takes turns keeping watch through the night, guarding the field beneath the stars. This year was different though. It was my first time doing it alone. I had just turned 20 and my father said that it was time I learned what it meant to be a responsible adult. He said it like it was a rite of passage, something every man in our family had to go through, and we've lost too much in the past to wild boars and macaques. My father says those little things can clear out an entire patch in one night if no one's watching. So like most farmers around here, we built a small treehouse for keeping watch. Nothing fancy, just bamboo poles, rusty nails, and an old tarp for a roof. It sits high enough to see over the corn and into the tree line, but low enough to stay steady when the wind howls through the forest. The day before I left, my father was sitting on the porch, sharpening his machete. My younger brother had left for school a few hours earlier, leaving the house unusually quiet. "Make sure you bring enough batteries," he said, "and don't sleep too early. You hear something, you shout." "I know," I said. "I'll be fine." He stopped sharpening and looked at me for the first time. His face was half in shadow. "Something's been scaring the dogs at night, and they won't even go near the edge of the woods." I laughed it off. Everyone in the village had been talking about strange noises lately. Low howls, something dragging through the brush. But people say things every harvest season. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" He had asked again for the zillionth time that day. "Dad, I got this. You can barely walk straight." I glared at his tightly bandaged ankle, courtesy of a reckless motorcyclist who had run into him hard and fractured his shin last month. "They haven't found the Nangan boys." His voice trailed off and my stomach sank a little. "Dad, those kids probably wandered off and got lost. They'll find them or they'll return home in no time," I said, more to calm myself than him. "It's been over a month. How long can they survive getting lost in the woods like that? Just be careful, all right," he said. "Start a good fire before dusk and keep it going all night. Don't let it burn out. It'll keep the animals and whatever else away. Just don't go setting the whole field on fire." "I won't," I said in passing. "I'm serious. Keep the fire going all night," he said in his whisper, Jesus, Dad, I will. I packed some rice, dried fish, 2 bottles of water, some packs of Marlboros, and my old flashlight. I also brought my phone even though there was no reception out there. It was still good for time checking and a few offline games. Before leaving, I wiped down my hunting rifle, checked the chamber, and slung it over my shoulder, just in case. Truth is, I kind of enjoy these nights alone in the field. Every now and then a wild boar shows up, and if I'm lucky, I get to bring home some fresh meat. I set out before noon, when the air was still warm and smelled faintly of soil and corn pollen. The road wound north through the village, past rice fields and clusters of wooden houses, before narrowing into a rough, uneven stretch where the asphalt gave way to gravel and dirt. I drove my old pickup for nearly 2 hours, the engine growling as I climbed higher into the hills. The elevation wasn't particularly high, just enough for the air to cool and thin slightly, but the road that led there was a narrow, winding mess. I had to ease my foot on the gas, keeping both hands firm on the wheel to keep the truck from skidding off the cliffside. I parked near a cluster of pines where the trail ended, killed the engine, and listened for a moment to the hum of cicadas and the distant rush of water. The air smelled of sap and damp earth. From there, it was a steady walk uphill. The narrow path wound through patches of pine trees before dipping sharply downhill again, where it crossed a shallow stream that cut through the valley floor. I stopped by the stream along the way and I threw in a line. The water was cold and clear, curling around my ankles as I waited for a bite. As I waited, something caught the light beneath the surface, a small glint and just below my reflection. I leaned closer and reached in, my fingers brushing against cold metal. When I pulled it out, I saw that it was an old rusted button, one of those cheap imitation gold ones that might have once been part of a uniform. The shine was long gone, but a faint yellow gleam still clung stubbornly to its edges. I turned it over in my hand, a thumb tracing the worn grooves, and a flicker of memory surfaced. Me as a kid standing by this same stream with my father, finding things just like this. Torn scraps of fabric, a dented bracelet, a broken piece of a yo-yo. Its paint faded and edges chipped from years of neglect. I even found a gold ring once, dulled by mud and time. I remembered how he had snatched it from me without a word and hurled it straight back into the river. "Don't pick up stuff like that, you hear me, boy?" he had said once, the words still sharp in my head. "Things come down from the hills sometimes. Best to leave them be." I stared at the button for a moment longer and then tossed it back into the water. It sank without a ripple, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. After half an hour of waiting, I finally caught 2 medium-sized mujar for dinner. I gutted them on a flat rock and wrapped them neatly in taro leaves for roasting later. It wasn't until I bent down to rinse the fish guts from my fingers that I noticed a faint sting between my toes. I looked down and saw 3 fat leeches, slick and black, clinging stubbornly to my skin. Dang it, I muttered under my breath. I sat on a rock and tried to pry them off, but they clung tighter, their bodies swelling slightly with each drop that they drank. Remembering what my father used to do, I took a pinch of salt from my rucksack and sprinkled it over them. They writhed and loosened, falling back into the stream one by one, leaving thin trails of blood that swirled away in the current. On my way back to the trail, I gathered a bundle of dry sticks and pine needles for kindling, the sharp resin scent clinging to my hands. The path cut through a shallow gully carved long ago by the river, narrow and uneven, its narrow floor streaked with red clay and scattered stones, with rocks and ferns jutting out along the sides and wild grass growing between them. During the rainy season, it filled with runoff from the hills, and sometimes when the river swelled past its banks with overflow, turning the gully into a fast, churning stream. But now it was mostly dry, just a few damp patches and the faint smell of wet earth lingering in the air. I followed it uphill, stepping over roots and loose stones until the ground leveled out again near the cornfield. And by then the sky had turned to dim copper, the last light bleeding softly through the haze. The cornfield lay atop a gentle knoll, encircling a small clearing where the old treehouse stood like a quiet sentinel above the golden stalks. From up there, the view stretched across the rippling field and down toward the north, where the land sloped lazily toward a stream that I had stopped by earlier in the day. Here the water ran wider and slower, winding through a narrow band of reeds that shimmered in the afternoon light. The air smelled faintly of sun-warmed corn and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, cicadas droned in the trees that lined the foothills. My treehouse stood on a crooked trunk in the center of the field, offering a clear view of the whole clearing and the darkening forest beyond. I climbed up into the treehouse and looked around. The small mat was still there in the corner, the old hanging lantern swaying gently in the breeze. Even the weathered wooden chest sat right where we had left it, packed with musty blankets, some half-burned, chunky white candles that my father had borrowed from the church, and a couple of torches. I unscrewed the old oil lantern and carefully wiped each part with a torn, oil-stained rag that I had found in the wooden chest. Once the glass was clear enough that I could almost see my own tired reflection, and the wick was trimmed just right, I filled the tank with kerosene and I lit it. The soft orange glow flickered to life, casting a warm circle of light that pushed back the dimming shadows around me. And then I set up the can clangers that my father had made years ago along the edge of the field. A single rope strung with old tin cans, each stuffed with a few small rocks. One end I tied to a tree at the edge of the forest, the other I ran up to the treehouse. The rope was stretched just above the tops of the corn stalks, loose enough that the cans could swing and clang when pulled, but not so low that they would scrape the plants. Every so often I would give it a tug, and the cans would rattle and clang across the rows, sharp and metallic, loud enough to scare off anything creeping too close and wake up the dead. My father used to say that sound carried far at night, and it was always wise to remind the forest that somebody was still awake. The fog had already started to roll in from the stream below, sliding between the corn rows like slow, pale smoke. By the time that I spread my mats and sat down, the air had grown damp and cold enough to make my breath visible. My first night was quiet. Too quiet, actually. The forest usually hums after dark. Crickets, frogs, wind in the leaves. But there was a stillness that felt wrong. I thought maybe it was because of the rain clouds and gathering somewhere far off. The air was heavy, pressing down. And the next day went by quietly. I looked around the field for any footprints or signs of animals, but I didn't find anything. The corn stood tall and golden, almost ready for harvest. I'd be picking them by hand, one by one, and stuffing them into gunny sacks and hauling them down the hill to my pickup. By midday, the heat drove me toward the stream. I waded in up to my knees and set up a simple fish trap that I had made from woven strips, anchoring it between two smooth stones where the current had narrowed. With luck, I would catch a few fish by dusk, enough for dinner, maybe even breakfast tomorrow. As I tightened the knots and watched the trap settle into the clear water, the faint breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Everything felt calm, almost too calm. It started on the second night. Around midnight, I woke to a sound. Soft, deliberate steps somewhere out in the field. At first, I thought it was a wild boar. I pushed myself up lazily and half dragged my feet to the door. Squinting through the bright, flickering glow of the fire outside, the stalks swayed gently in the wind, but nothing moved among them, and then the steps stopped. I reached over and gave the can clangers a few tugs, the cans clattering in the dark, and then another pull just to be sure. I waited. The air felt thick and damp, every sound too sharp, too close. And after a minute, I heard it again. The same rustle, but this time it came from farther off, like something circling the edge of the field. I grabbed and swung my flashlight around, its beam slicing through the rows, but the corn swallowed everything whole. I shouted, "Hey, who's there?" And then a rustle, faster this time, moving away toward the forest. I told myself that it was just an animal and I lay back down, but I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes I thought that I heard it again, the faint whisper of movement somewhere in the corn. At dawn, I climbed down and I looked for tracks. I found a few broken stalks near the edge of the field, but no clear prints. It didn't look like wild boars. The stalks were bent higher up, as if someone or something had brushed through standing tall. By the third night, I was already uneasy. The air felt colder and heavier somehow. I sat on the edge of the platform with my legs hanging, rifle resting beside me. I had turned off the oil lantern inside the treehouse so that my eyes could adjust, staring out through the glow of the campfire. The moon hung pale and ghostly behind a veil of thin clouds. After a simple meal of cold rice, grilled fish, and my father's homemade sambal, I sat by the door peeling off one of the wild mangoes that I had picked earlier near the stream. They were small and greenish, and not the kind you would buy in town, but the kind that grew on old trees deep in the forest. Sweet, fibrous, and too stringy to chew. And that's when something caught my eye. Something was standing near the edge of the field. Or maybe it wasn't. At first, I thought it was just the moonlight catching on the stalks, the way that shadows sometimes knit themselves into strange shapes when you stare too long. But the longer I looked, the less sure I became. There was a shape there, upright and still, taller than any man I had ever seen. It didn't move at first. It just stood there among the trees, maybe 30 meters away, half hidden by the mist. The breeze stirred the stalks, and for a moment I lost sight of it. When the wind died, it seemed closer, or maybe that was just my imagination. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but it didn't change. It was still there. Its head was tilted slightly as if it were listening or trying to understand something. I couldn't make out a face, only a vague outline that seemed to waver whenever the wind moved the corn. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that it was nothing, just the corn bending, the fog playing tricks again. But then, even the night seemed to hold its breath. I grabbed my flashlight, blinked, and it was gone. The corn rippled for a few seconds and then went still. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I thought about going home, but pride or maybe fear of ridicule kept me there. I told myself that it was just a trick of the light, that I had been staring too long into the dark. And that day, when I was busy stuffing gunny sacks with corn under the scorching sun, I heard my cousin Rio's voice calling from the path. He had brought food, fresh batteries, and 2 cigarette packs. We talked for a while about the harvest, the weather, nothing important. sharing a smoke as he helped me fill the sacks with the rest of the day's yield. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just said that I hadn't been sleeping well. And before he left, he warned me to keep the fire going until morning. And then he told me a horrifying story about a mass murder that had taken place in the forest during a period of political unrest decades ago. According to him, the victims were slaughtered and tossed into a ravine. Men, women, and even children. Ever since then, he said no one had dared to venture into the northern part of the forest. I rolled my eyes, convinced he was only trying to frighten me. But that night, lying awake in the treehouse, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Something clicked when my mind returned to the old button that I had found earlier in the river. The rivers upstream ran north, deep into the mountainous heart of the forest. Whatever relics ended up downstream must have been carried from there. And then I remembered the anger, no, the disgust on my father's face when he used to warn me as a child never to pick things up out of the river. It dawned on me that there was something that he had never told me. And by the time the clock struck 9, I was drifting in and out of sleep, my eyes fixed on the glow of my phone until exhaustion finally claimed me. The sound started earlier than usual, around 10. I had been asleep when I woke with a jolt, my chest tight and a cold crawling anxiety creeping up my spine. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint metallic scent of wet soil. Outside, a thin drizzle had begun, soft at first, then steady, and the temperature had dropped sharply, even before midnight, sending shivers through my bare arms. The first rustle came from the far side of the field, then another closer. The wind picked up, but the noises didn't follow its rhythm. They were deliberate, measured, like someone or something stepping carefully through wet leaves. I turned off the lantern and crouched low to the floor, pressing my eyes to the gap between the wooden boards. There was movement in the corn again further away, something tall and dark and gliding rather than walking. I saw it for a fraction of a second, long enough to show that it wasn't bending the stalks like a person would. It seemed to move through them, almost slipping between the plants. And then the smell hit me, sudden and overwhelming. It was earthy and cloying, sharp and sour like rotting fruit steeped in wet soil. And beneath it, something fouler, something unmistakably like decay. My stomach lurched and I gagged, pressing my sleeve hard against my nose in a futile attempt to keep it out. Minutes passed and I lost sight of it. The forest beyond the field was pitch black now, the kind of darkness that makes you doubt the ground beneath your feet. And then a new sound. Wood creaking, slow and deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. And that's when it hit me. The fire had died out. It was climbing. And the ladder to the treehouse groaned once and then again louder. My chest tightened, I froze listening. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate creak like somebody testing each rung. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it through the door. The weak beam caught nothing, just mist, tree bark, and corn swaying in the dark. My hands were shaking so badly that the light trembled across the boards. I set the flashlight down by the edge, angling it toward the ladder, and I grabbed my rifle. "Go away!" I shouted, voice cracking. The ladder groaned again. I kicked at it hard, the whole treehouse shuddering under my feet. I screamed and cursed for it to stop, to leave me alone until my throat burned raw. And then something in me snapped. I pulled the trigger. The rifle thundered, deafening in the small space. Smoke filled the air, stinging my nose. The echo rolled out into the forest and it was gone. Heart pounding, I swung the small door shut and I jammed the latch in place. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the flickering beam of the flashlight as it dimmed on the floor. Later, rain returned, the kind of steady drizzle that makes the world feel half asleep. I wrapped myself in my jacket and listened to the patter on the tarp roof. Around midnight, the rain eased. I must have dozed off because I woke up to silence. The air was cold and the smell of wet soil and iron hung in the air. I turned off the lantern. I crouched and peeked through the gap in the floor. Down below at the base of the trees, something was looking up at me. I couldn't see its face, just the dark outline of its head and shoulders. Slick with rain, its skin so pale that it almost glowed. Its arms hung too low, fingers nearly brushing the ground. It didn't move. It just stood there, head tilted again like before. Curious. I thought that I could hear breathing, slow and heavy, mixed with the faint sound of dripping water. I scrambled to grab my rifle, heart hammering in my chest, and when I looked again, the thing was gone. A cold dread settled over me as I fumbled with the lantern, finally managing to light it in a panic. The warm glow spilled across the floorboards, a fragile barrier against the darkness outside. Fire, the only thing keeping me safe, felt suddenly too small, too weak to hold back whatever had been there. I stayed up all night, the lantern casting a warm, trembling glow over the floorboards. My rifle sat across my lap, barrel trained on the small door, every creak or whisper of wind making me flinch. And the hours stretched endlessly, each one heavier than the last. I tried to keep my eyes open, scanning the shadows beyond the clearing, listening for the slightest rustle in the corn. Every sound made my heart jump. Branches snapping, the distant call of a night bird, the occasional drip of rain from the canopy above. Sleep teased me, hovering just out of reach until finally exhaustion claimed me. I slumped against the corner, rifle still in hand, and the lantern's glow flickered across the floorboards as the first light of dawn cracked through the trees. At some point after sunrise, exhaustion hit me like a drug. When I finally stirred, everything was already changing around me. The air cooler, the shadows stretching long across the field. It was just a few moments before sunset. My head throbbed, my muscles ached, and my stomach growled relentlessly from hunger and dehydration. I blinked several times, disoriented, the crimson and orange streaks of the sinking sun painting the clearing in a surreal, almost threatening light. Panic rose with a hollow weight in my chest as I realized with a sinking dread that it was far too late to make it back to my car. Any attempt to leave now would be foolish. That thing, whatever it was, would reach me long before I reached safety. My eyes fell on the ladder leading up to the treehouse, and my stomach tightened. Deep, jagged scratches marred the wood, gouged as if something with long claws had tried to climb up during the night. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and shivered, imagining what could have made them. My hands shook as I scrambled to gather dry sticks and branches, moving as fast as I could before the last light disappeared. I piled them a little closer to the treehouse and struck a match. Sparks flared, smoke curled upward, and fire caught with a crackle. I crouched close, shooting the flame from the wind, fanning it with frantic care. The air smelled of sap and wet earth. I whispered a silent plea for the rain to stay away, because this fire was all that I had. Whatever I had glimpsed the night before watching me from the shadows beneath the treehouse had been provoked by my presence. Seeing me up close had awakened something in it. Something curious, bold, hungry. And now it was only a matter of time before it returned. And by the time the sun had finally slipped below the horizon, the forest around me had become a solid and suffocating black. My fire, the only barrier between me and the shadows beyond, leapt into the sky, sending sparks swirling like startled fireflies. The heat was intense, washing over my face and arms and making me sweat despite the cool night air. And then I climbed back up into the treehouse, swung the doors shut and secured the latch with a firm click. I sank onto the small mat, a rifle across my lap, listening to the fire crackle below and the wind whispering through the corn. I tried to force down some of the leftover food my cousin had brought, stale rice and a bit of dried fish. I needed something in me, some strength for whatever might come crawling back through the darkness. I just had to make it through one more night. If I could survive until the first hint of morning light, I would sprint down the hill and never look back until I was safely in my truck. I woke to a heavy, suffocating silence pressing in from every direction. My hand immediately fumbled for the phone, hoping, maybe desperately, that it was closer to dawn. 2:15 a.m. I forced myself upright, my muscles stiff and trembling from hours of tension and exhaustion. The silence was so absolute that it made my own heartbeat feel thunderous in my ears. I grabbed my rifle, hands slippery with sweat, and crept toward the narrow gap between the wooden boards. Outside, the fire that I had tended so obsessively it almost died. Only a few stubborn embers clung to the last brittle stalks and branches that I had fed it, sending tiny sparks spiraling into the night air. The weak flames flickered and bent with the wind, throwing distorted shadows across the clearing, making the corn stalks sway in slow, ghostly rhythms. And then something moved at the edge of the field near the tree line. A dark, elongated figure slipped between the trees, blending almost seamlessly with the inky night. It moved with an unnatural smoothness, gliding over the corn stalks like a living shadow, a mass of black smoke hovering just above the plants. I fumbled for the door, my hands trembling as I unlocked the latch and swung it open. A rush of cold night air hit me. I lifted my rifle, cocked it with shaking hands, and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Leave me alone!" I aimed at the approaching figure, my finger tightening on the trigger. The first shot tore through the night with a deafening bang, echoing across the field and into the forest beyond. The thing hesitated for a fraction of a second, unsure, but it didn't stop. It kept moving closer. Another shot. This time the bullet flew past the highest corn stalks, rattling them as they swayed in its wake. And now the thing froze. For a moment, long enough that I could see it more clearly and more fully, it resembled what I had always imagined a shadow person to look like, only taller and lankier, its outline less defined, more like a swirling, smoke-thick humanoid form. It didn't have a face, not really. Just a mass of dark, shifting shadow that moved with a purpose I couldn't comprehend. I didn't know what else to call it. I spun around and stumbled to the wooden chest, my hands shaking so hard that I could barely get the latch open. The lid creaked and then slammed back against the wall. Inside were the same old things. Musty blankets, stubby candles, and a few makeshift torches that we had made from years ago out of dried rags and broken chair legs. I snatched the torches and then reached for the kerosene tin that I kept by the wall, spilling almost half of it in my haste. The sharp, oily smell filled the air as I poured, soaking the rags until they dripped. My breath came out quick and shallow. The first match snapped between my trembling fingers. The second flared, bright and sudden. I lit the first torch and stumbled toward the door. For a second, I just stood there, staring out into these swaying stalks and the deep darkness beyond. And then I threw the torch as hard as I could. It tumbled through the air and landed in the clearing below, its flame flashing against the stalks, shadows twisting and lurching like bodies. I froze, my chest tight with panic, unable to look away. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee, but my legs wouldn't obey. I could only watch, paralyzed with terror, as the thing grew bolder, its shadowy hands crawling and stretching toward me like the night itself had come alive. I lit another torch and then another, tossing them one by one into the field as hard as I could. One toward the narrow path that led out of the clearing, another toward the far corner where the corn grew thick and high. I poured the last of the kerosene from the tin onto my final torch and I lit it. The flames licking hungrily at the dry cloth. Without thinking, I hurled it toward the shadowy figure as it slithered into the clearing. The torch hit the ground and instantly the dry stalks around me caught fire. The sparks leapt, flames spread, and within moments, the small clearing was swallowed by roaring walls of fire. Thick black smoke curled upward, choking the air and swallowing the thing from sight. And the inferno crackled and hissed around me, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't just fighting the creature anymore. I was trapped in my own funeral pyre. The flames licked closer, the heat unbearable, smoke stinging my eyes, and I realized with a sinking, sickening dread that the very fire that I had recklessly unleashed, the fire that I thought would protect me, was now a cage. I moved fast, too fast, I didn't even think. I jumped from the treehouse, hitting the ground hard, my right foot twisting underneath me with a sickening crack. Pain shot up my leg like electricity. I hissed, clutching at my ankle, the world blurring with hot tears and smoke. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My chest heaved as I looked around, eyes stinging, trying to find a way out. Flames encircled me in every direction, the air heavy with burning ash. Without the treehouse walls to shield me, the heat felt alive, searing, angry, and merciless. Every breath scalded my throat. Good job, I thought bitterly. Now you're really going to burn alive out here. And then something pierced through the chaos. A faint, sweet smell drifting through the smoke. Grilled corn. The scent hit me like a happy memory. Summer evenings in the field with my father and brother, the crackle of the fire, the laughter, the smell of grilled corn smothered in melted cheese clinging to our clothes. For a second, it didn't feel like hell. It felt like home. And that memory lit a spark inside me stronger than any fire around me. I turned my head to the right, squinting through the haze. Beyond the wall of flames, I could just make out the small dirt path leading out of the clearing, weaving through the cornfield and down the hill toward the stream. If I could reach it fast enough, if I could just get to the water, I might still make it out alive. My ankle throbbed, but I pushed the pain aside. Maybe I could limp, crawl, hell, even roll my way down like a barrel if I had to. Anything was better than standing here waiting to burn. I staggered forward, limping, dragging my bad leg behind me. The pain was blinding, but the fear was stronger. Sparks rained down from above, landing on my sleeves and hair. I batted them away frantically and kept going. The sound of the fire was deafening. A violent roar that drowned out everything, even my own shouts. I could feel it eating up the air, sucking the breath right out of my lungs. And then I broke into a sprint or something close to it. The world became a blur of orange and black. I covered my face with one arm and hurled myself through the wall of fire. For a second, I felt the flames lick my skin and heard the fabric of my shirt crackle. The stench of burning cotton and hair filled my nostrils. I stumbled out on the other side screaming, not from fear this time, but from sheer raw pain. I fell into the cornfield, rolling instinctively, crushing dry stalks beneath me as I tried to smother any embers on my clothes. My vision swam. Everything around me was chaos. flames spreading and smoke thick as tar suffocating me from every direction. I tried to get up. My ankles screamed with every step, but I forced myself forward, half limping, half crawling down the narrow dirt path. The hill felt endless, but somewhere below, I could hear the faint, steady murmur of the stream. My only chance. I pushed myself harder, tasting blood and ash in my mouth until the ground finally gave way beneath me. I slid, tumbling through the dirt and broken stalks, rolling uncontrollably down the slope until the world went cold and wet. The stream swallowed me whole, hissing as the fire on my clothes died out in bursts of steam. I had no idea how many bones that I had broken from rolling down the hill, or how bad my burns were from running through the fire. But I was alive, somehow, impossibly still alive. But I couldn't stay down, not yet. I still had to make it to safety. As I limped forward, every step sending jolts of agony through my body, my hand brushed against the keys still hooked to my belt loop. They jingled softly, the split ring holding them intact. Relief washed over me in that tiny, almost ridiculous sound. I felt a flicker of happiness, glad that I hadn't lost them. The faint glow from the fire in the distance lit the overgrown path, guiding me. I climbed into my truck, my heart still hammering, and I slid the key into the ignition. When the engine roared to life, the whole vehicle shuddered with a soft jolt, and a sudden, almost overwhelming wave of relief washed over me. When the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, I pressed the accelerator a little more, merging onto a wider road that would eventually lead me back toward my neighborhood. Each bump and dip of the asphalt reminded me just how sore I still was, but the thought of home kept me moving. I didn't even bother pulling the truck into our spacious front yard. I eased it to a stop on the shoulder of the road in front of the house, killed the engine and climbed out. Every step a reminder of the night that I had survived. The light in the living room was on. My father was already awake. I knocked hard on the front door 3 times and then I collapsed to my knees. When I came to, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, IV lines snaking around my arms and an oxygen mask covering my face. My father's pained expression hovered above me, his bloodshot eyes watery as he gently brushed my cheek with his hand. The first words that slipped from my lips were apologies for the cornfield, still smoldering in my mind. He shook his head, his voice soft but firm as he told me not to worry about it. The injuries were worse than I had realized. My shin and ankle were fractured, 2 ribs were broken, both hands badly scraped and stitched up, and my shoulder dislocated. The burns across my body, though thankfully not life-threatening, had charred the ends of my hair. The medical staff had to shave the burnt strands away to properly treat my scalp. And 2.5 weeks later, the doctors finally said that I was strong enough to go home. When my father came to pick me up, he brought me a clean set of clothes, a soft, oversized shirt that wouldn't rub against the bandages, and a pair of loose pants. The first few days back home were strange. The house felt the same, yet everything in me felt different. I was fragile, cautious, aware of every small movement. My room had been rearranged so that I could move around easily. My bed now sat closer to the window, and a sturdy chair stood beside it for when I needed a rest after short walks. My father hovered more than usual, always close by when I shifted or tried to stand. At night, the pain would return in small waves, dull throbs from my ribs, sharp stings from my healing skin, but it was a pain that I could live with. Sometimes I would wake up sweating, hearing echoes of the fire in my dreams, but when I looked over and saw the soft light from the hallway spilling through my half-open door, I would remind myself that I was safe. Recovery would take months, they said, maybe longer before I could walk without a limp or lift my arm without wincing. But for now, being home, breathing clean air, feeling the warmth of morning light instead of the sterile chill of a hospital room was enough. I haven't told my father what really happened in the cornfield that night, and he hasn't asked me a single question about it either. Maybe he knows that I'm not ready to talk, or maybe he's seen enough in my face. There are nights when I wake up screaming bloody murder, drenched in sweat, a heavy panic pressing down on my chest as if somebody was standing right beside my bed and watching. My father rushes in every time, calm but shaken, his hands gripping my shoulders until I come back to myself. He says that I talk in my sleep too, calling his name, calling my brothers, begging them to check the windows and doors and make sure that everything's locked tight. I was lucky, we all were, and that the fire hadn't spread beyond the knoll, that it didn't swallow the rest of the forest or the neighboring farms. But the cornfield, it was gone. Blackened earth, charred stalks, ashes where life used to grow. Once the pain in my body dulled enough for me to start walking again, another kind of ache had took its place. Guilt. There were no crops to sell in the market this season, maybe not even the next. My father tries to tell me that it doesn't matter, that what counts is that I made it out alive, that no loss in this world could ever measure up to losing a son. I nod every time. But still each night when the house is quiet and the world goes dark, that same thought gnaws at me like an open wound. I failed him. My cousin Rio and a few people from the village went back to the cornfield during my first week in the hospital to see if anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of the treehouse. They found nothing worth keeping. My rifle, my phone, and the chest were charred and mangled beyond recognition, melted shapes of what they once were. Strangely, they came across other things scattered across the burnt fields too. Torn, dirt-stained scraps of clothing, dented bracelets, pieces of rusted necklaces and buttons half buried in ash. Even a charred fragment of a yo-yo. How did those things end up there? Were there others in the fire with me? Who were they? What happened to them? Where did they go? No human remains were found. Only those strange, time-worn objects. And deep down, I think that I already know the answer. Because that night, right before I forced myself through the wall of flames, I saw and heard something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. As the thing moved across the cornfield trying to escape the fire, its form began to shift. Just for a moment, a flicker between the smoke and the light. I saw it clearly, and that's when the real horror had hit me. It wasn't just a formless shadow. Long dark hands were reaching out from inside its smoky mass, stretching and clawing as if fighting to break free or to get to me first. They didn't move like human limbs. They twisted and bent, folding in on themselves before vanishing back into the darkness, only to reappear elsewhere, jerking, reaching, and writhing. And right before I rolled down the hill, I heard them. The screams, high-pitched, distorted, whistling like air forced through broken glass. Men, women, and children. Their cries rose above the roar of the flames, piercing and unearthly, echoing through the burning field until the night itself seemed to wail with them. It is really bizarre to look back on the past year and consider that there was a time when my life was simple. I have a different life today, and I would argue I'm a different person. I have to eat every night at specifically 6 p.m. If I don't, there are consequences. That doesn't sound all that weird. People eat at 6 p.m. all the time. Some earlier, some later. I can't do that. It has to be exactly 6 p.m. And if I don't, there are consequences. You wouldn't think that there would be, but there is. And yeah, it is as unusual as it sounds. It started about a year ago. My family was taking me out to celebrate finishing my education as a dental technician. I had technically already worked in the field for some time, mostly internships, but now I had it all on paper. I was officially done and I could get myself a real job. I had a couple of places lined up. My mom was really excited about it. She booked a table at a pretty pricey downtown restaurant. You need to book it at least a month or two in advance, especially if you want a weekend or an evening slot. Not only did she do that, but she booked it with space to spare. Mom, Dad, my girlfriend Amy, my older brother, and my grandparents. One big outing. I was a bit nervous about them meeting Amy as it was their first time, but I figured it would be fine. When we got there around 5:30 on a Friday, I'm not gonna out the restaurant, I think they're closed now, but it was this nice downtown place, slightly elevated with an outdoors terrace. They had 2 bars and these big booths for parties of up to 8. When we got there, they showed us inside, asked us to take off our shoes, and sat us down at the table. First thing they did was go person by person and wash our hands at the table. The appetizer was meant to be eaten with your hands. That was the kind of vibe that we were walking into. And just for contrast, I'm not into expensive stuff. The whole reason that I got into dentistry at all was because I used to be anxious about tongues. I started reading about them just to kinda demystify them, and all of a sudden it became an interest. And then I went from tongue to teeth. But food-wise, I'm a ramen noodle kinda guy. I'm not really about the whole washing my hands with eucalyptus water thing. And we had a couple of drinks, some laughs, some appetizers. And they had this shrimp thing they served with dry ice that made the whole table look like a cloud. The chef was apparently some big thing. I think I've seen him on the TV a couple of times. Let's just call him Chef Mike for reference. It'd be too easy to identify him if I gave you the real first name. We saw him a couple of times that day. A lot of people were running in and out of the kitchen, and if you listened closely, you could hear somebody yelling in the other room. As the clock closed in on 6 p.m., a waiter put down a plate right next to me. No one else got a plate like that. It was a kind of zesty halibut with haricots, verts, and asparagus foam. When I looked up, I realized that I had been served by Chef Mike himself. "For the birthday boy," he smiled. "It's not my birthday," I smiled back, "but thank you." "Pardon my assumption. May I ask the occasion?" The others at the table chimed in. My grandparents were talking about how inventive I was as a child. My mother straightened her back and started talking about my excellent oral health. Amy was clinging to my arm, a bit overwhelmed by the whole outing. She's not a fan of strangers. Chef Mike just smiled at me. "Oh, then you must have a refined palate," he said. "Please, it's on the house." A clock chimed in the background. 6 p.m. on the dot. I took a bite. I'm not going to say that the halibut was the best thing I had ever had. It wasn't. It was good though. Buttery smooth with just enough texture to stick to your tongue. The foam did a lot of heavy lifting. It was just a couple of bites, but I really enjoyed it. There really wasn't much more to it. We had a lovely dinner and dessert, and then as we called it a night, Amy and I took an Uber back to our place. That's when I noticed something curious. Somebody had sent me money. $80. Now, it's not a lot of money, but there was no name or note attached to it. I figured it was my parents wanting to give me a little extra to go out with Amy, but I wasn't sure. I chalked it up to miscommunication and sent out a, "Hey, thanks for the $80 in the family group chat." No one responded. I didn't really think about it. The next day, I was back to slurping up a pack of ramen noodles while doing paperwork. To be a bit extra fancy, I added some fresh bell peppers. I was halfway through an article when I got a notification. $65. No name or note attached. Strange. Not just that I got money again, but that it was a different amount. I sent out another message in the family group chat, thinking maybe my grandparents were the ones who had sent it. Maybe they thought the first didn't go through. I could only speculate, but the group chat stayed silent. Over the next few days, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, there were days when I didn't get any money at all. I did get a couple more deposits though, but only on days when I had dinner at exactly 6 p.m. It was the only common denominator. Ramen with bell peppers, yeah, I know, twice in a week, got me another $65. Fried chicken and rice got me $70. Add some curry sauce and have it again the next day. I got $73. The sums would differ, but I would only get something on the days where I ate at exactly 6 p.m. And the thing is, it was fast and consistent. I could be sitting at home chilling in front of the TV and I would get a notification, but only if I was having dinner at 6 p.m. This brought me to a couple of uncomfortable realizations. First off, the sums would differ depending on what I ate, meaning that there was some kind of rating system. And second of all, and maybe more importantly, somebody could tell when I was eating. Someone was somehow observing me eat. This triggered all kinds of paranoid responses in me. I would stop eating out of spite. I would bring Amy over and ask her to check outside for somebody watching me through the windows. I borrowed a strong magnet from a local magnet fisher to check if I got any bugs on me. All of it turned out nothing. I think the only thing I managed to do was convince Amy that I was getting paranoid. She wasn't too happy about it, but I think that's just because she worries. She's a worrier. One day, I decided to test it all further. I locked myself in the bathroom. I turned off the lights and hid behind the shower curtain. I had a microwaved waffle with some vanilla ice cream in a bowl. I took little bites at exactly 6 p.m. and listened for a notification on my phone. My hands were a bit shaky. I was so focused on listening for that sound that every creak and groan of the apartment building sent sparks into my chest. As soon as I finished the bowl, the phone beeped. $45. I couldn't even see my own hands. Unless somebody was using infrared or sonar, there was no way that they could see or hear what the hell I was doing. Something wasn't adding up. I kept experimenting over the next few days. I tried to test the boundaries of what counted as dinner. Soft foods like drinks and slushies and marmalade didn't count. Neither did snacks like chips or crackers. It had to be something substantial and traditional. I tried going the other way around. I got this really nice cut of beef from a local butcher. I asked Amy to help prepare it, seeing as she's a bit more of a cook than I am. She put some real love into that thing, using a sort of truffle glaze and serving it with roasted potatoes. I asked her to share it with me, but she insisted that I had it on my own. She was sort of invested into this experiment too. She had seen the deposits. I sat down at this little table. I had a heated cloth napkin, a glass of red wine, and ate by candlelight. Once I finished, I checked my phone. $1,200. This wasn't just a creepy experiment anymore. This was real money, rent money. Amy freaked out when I showed her, dancing around the kitchen like she had won the lottery. "Tomorrow I'll make homemade ciabatta and chili," she said. "If this is what one steak gets us, what'll the 3-course meal do?" "But where's it coming from?" I asked her. "Why are we getting it? Why don't you just ask?" If there's somebody watching, then clearly they're listening. She had a point. Amy had some last-minute business to deal with the next day, so I ended up making some hot dogs and mashed potatoes. And nothing fancy, just the powdered stuff right out of the box. But as I sat down, I had an idea. I took a bite and I spoke into the empty room. If you can hear me, add 50 cents to the next deposit. I had never gotten anything less than full dollars, so yeah, that would catch my attention. I tried watching a show as I ate, but I kept getting this pounding in my chest whenever I thought about being watched. What was the point in watching me eat? And why at 6 p.m.? I finished my meal and put the plate away. As I turned on the dishwasher, my phone chimed. $21.50. Someone was listening. Testing this further just made it stranger. I had some Indian takeout food on the bus and I still got a deposit. They were still watching me when I was on the move as long as I had a proper meal. I tried dragging dinner out for 2 hours. I still got a deposit, but much less than usual. I could be eating alone or with friends or at a restaurant. It didn't matter. Someone knew what I was doing and they were grading it on a scale. I started asking questions. 50 cents for yes, 25 cents for no. I already knew they could hear me, so that was already settled. Can you see me? 50 cents, yes. Do I know you? 25 cents, no. Do you want to hurt me? 25 cents, no. I was so fascinated that it started taking up a lot of time. I would make charts and weigh my options on what to ask. We quickly realized that it didn't work if Amy asked. It had to be me. But when asked if I knew that Amy was there, I got a very clear yes. I started to notice a couple of patterns in the payments. Home-cooked meals regularly got bigger deposits, also eating alone. White wine was a big no-no, but red wine was a yes, especially if chilled. I was slowly mapping another person's palate, and I have to admit it was pretty amazing. A little more salt, another $5. A little less butter, that's another $3. All the while I was asking questions. Whoever was watching me had a hard time answering what or who they were. We had to narrow it down to what they weren't. They were not a regular person. Not a demon or a mythical creature, not an alien. I couldn't get a clear enough answer, but I managed to understand that they used to be a person. Not a ghost though, they were clear about that. 25 cents clear. I came up with this system of multiple choice answers. I would write up answer sheets with increments of 10 cents each. That's how I figured out where they came from. First day I asked what continent they lived on. I got 30 cents correlating with my North America answer. The next day it pointed me to the United States. Makes sense, that's where I am. The third day I asked them to write out the first letter of the state code. I got 19 cents, meaning S. The next day I got 4 cents, meaning D. SD, South Dakota. Pretty far away. I tried to narrow down exactly where they were at, but after a while they stopped answering. Turns out they didn't know for sure. It was east of the river, that much I figured out. I got the impression that whoever I was communicating with wasn't entirely sure either. Some days the question that I asked took longer to respond to, and there'd be a delay before I got the deposit. All the while I was raking in some pretty good money. I was averaging $150 a day just from sticking to the dinner schedule. Amy didn't ask too many questions. We could really use the money if we wanted to get a bigger place. But I had to start asking some uncomfortable questions. I couldn't get over what kind of deal I was actually making. Why would someone go to such lengths just to have me follow a strict schedule? And it was then, almost 2 months after that celebration dinner, that I got a visitor. It was a regular Tuesday. I had started my new job just a couple of weeks prior, so I was more tired than usual when I got home from work. All the tension of getting to know a new workplace and just collapsed from my shoulders. Amy was working overtime, but she had prepared a recipe for me to make to ensure that we got the most out of our daily mystery deposit. But that's when I got a knock on the door. Now I get visitors every now and then. My parents, family, Amy's friends. But this was someone that I hadn't seen at my door before. Looking through the peephole, I realized that I was looking at none other than our local celebrity chef, Chef Mike. I opened the door, scratching my head. "Hey," he said, dropping the TV persona. "Remember me?" "Yeah, sure," I said. "What are you doing here?" "Have you been getting the payments?" "You know about them." "Yeah," he nodded. "I get them sometimes too. I just gotta cook the right thing." I invited him in and we got to chatting. Chef Mike told me all about the setup. About once a week, he got a deposit if he served that halibut dish to someone. They didn't have to order it and he would pay for it. It just had to be prepared in a certain way and offered at a certain time and date. As Chef Mike explained it, he wandered around my kitchen making sure to not touch the counter. It was kind of filthy. Amy doesn't really do dishes and I'm not much for cleaning. Chef Mike gave me a long look. "I stopped getting payments after you came by. I think our benefactor has taken a liking to you." "Benefactor? Is that what it is?" "I honestly don't know," he shrugged. "But whatever it is, it kickstarted my career. I made some serious money with this arrangement. Just from cooking halibut. It's not just cooking a halibut, it's cooking it to perfection. It's cooking it over a process that has taken me years to calibrate. No one else can do it. It's unique." He pointed a finger at me and I sat down. Chef Mike had come by to cook me dinner. He wasn't getting payments for halibut anymore, so he figured the benefactor had taken a liking to me. He wanted to try cooking for me to see if it paid off. It sounded almost threatening, like he wasn't asking. He wanted me to agree to him coming by 2 times per week, cooking things he knew would get us a lot of money. I wouldn't have to send him anything, he got deposits of his own. Somehow, our benefactor knew that not only was I having dinner at the exact time, but he also knew exactly who had prepared it. And I mean, what could I say? I was getting paid to enjoy a gourmet meal 2 times a week. How can that be a bad thing? I wasn't being tricked here, I saw the whole thing from start to finish. No matter if he made a paella or a chicken frittata, I'd see the whole thing, no tricks. So yeah, I agreed. Amy would have killed me if I didn't. She got all the leftovers that she wanted. That, and she was a bit of a closeted Chef Mike fan. She followed his YouTube channel. Things changed rapidly after Chef Mike and I shook hands on this deal. He got all new kitchenware for me and had a firm come by to clean. He put in this new hood over the stove and put in a wall-mounted spice rack. All custom jars and no labels necessary. On days when he came by, he would sometimes bring an assistant or a sous chef. He was taking it seriously. I can't count how many unnamed people came and went through my kitchen during those days. Some didn't even look like chefs, more like mercenaries. And deposits had kicked up significantly. My max payout was somewhere around $3,200. It never dipped below $300. Still having him around was nerve-wracking. He had an absolute shit temper, and he would blow up at Amy all the time. She would just be excited to have him there and he would cuss her out for staring. It was heartbreaking watching her go from all excited to withdrawn. After a while, she would avoid coming out at all on days when he was there. All the while, I was still trying to understand our benefactor. I asked him to spell out his name. but all I got was N and O, 14 cents and 15 cents. And then I decided that I had to ask some big questions, something that would take a long time to answer, but that I had to know. Despite knowing that it might take weeks to get the full picture, I painstakingly made a schedule to ask a question that I couldn't stop thinking about. How can you see me? It took 8 days to get a complete answer. Every day, I checked the deposit and the corresponding number of cents. I put up one post-it a day until the answer was staring at me. 21, 18, 5, 25, 5, and 19. Your eyes. I tried eating with my eyes closed, but that didn't seem to affect it at all. That confused me. If this thing could somehow experience things through my eyes, that didn't explain why it wanted me to eat. I started getting strange messages not related to the questions that I had asked. Letters that wasn't a response to anything that I asked. I could ask a yes or no question and get 4 cents, a D. Over the weeks that followed, I filled my fridge with all kinds of strange messages, all written on colorful post-it notes. Good taste, best tongue, more salt. Chef Mike shared that he was getting messages too, but he hadn't figured out that they had a meaning yet. It was only when I pointed it out that he realized that he had started getting cents. He hadn't gotten those before. He wrote out all the cents that he had received in a number sequence and had me translate it while he cooked. And this one says, "Can't see," I said, pointing to a series of post-its. This other one says, "Can't touch." So he can't touch and can't see. And he lives in South Dakota. And he sees things with other people's eyes. Chef Mike shuddered. He didn't like that. Amy was standing quiet in the corner, keeping her head down. He says that I have a good tongue. The best, I added. What do you think that means? Well, Chef Mike sighed. Over the years I've worked with him, he made me perfect that one halibut dish as a sort of calibration. Maybe he was looking for someone to enjoy it the right way. But how does he know that I do that? He shrugged. See through your eyes, taste through your tongue. Taking all that I had learned into account, I decided to dive deeper into another question. Why specifically at 6 p.m.? Why was that so important? And the answer I got was as simple as it was infuriating. Dinner. I asked what happened before that and why it couldn't be 5 p.m. Gym. The benefactor had a schedule. Work, gym, dinner, woman, sleep. I got this impression of somebody living vicariously through others, maybe literally. How else can you explain somebody knowing that I'm eating strawberries and cream in the dark, and not just flushing them down the toilet? I shared my findings with Amy, all the post-its, the talks with Chef Mike, the experiments, the questions. I showed her my conclusions and suspicions, drawing it out of my iPad like I was mapping a conspiracy theory. Red lines from one circle to another, dates, answers. I had printed out pages of deposits and highlighted every cent. Just in case, I had checked if the full dollar amount was anything due. It wasn't. And that rating, it was getting intricate. The benefactor had a very particular palate. It enjoyed beef the most, well done surprisingly. Grilled was a no-go, but it enjoyed the barbecue in various glazes. There was a little upshoot whenever I had a pleasant appetizer, and even more if I finished with a dessert. Chef Mike managed to break the record with a $4,100 deposit after serving me a 4-course meal. But man, it was awkward. I was just sitting there savoring it, while Amy watched from the other side of the room. I could tell that she was having second thoughts about this entire thing. I couldn't blame her, but we were talking about big money by now. This was a daily income in the potential thousands. Finally, at one point, she just flat out asked me about all of it. We were driving home from the grocery store and she had me pull over. It was almost dinner time. We had gotten stuck in traffic and I was a bit stressed, but I did as she had asked. She put her hand on my shoulder. "I think we should stop," she said. "We got so much from this, there's gotta be a problem with it. I don't feel comfortable doing this." "It's a lot of money," I agreed, "but can we afford to stop?" She nodded. "We got a lot, I know, and we can put it to good use. But when's enough? Didn't you want to be a dental technician?" "I am a dental technician," I insisted. "You spend more time on your charts and recipes," she said. "That's all your time." "It's income in the thousands, Amy. The thousands. And what do they get from you that's worth that kind of money?" I didn't have an answer. My tongue felt dry. The clock was almost 6 p.m. I leaned back and smacked my seat. Amy recoiled a little and I reached out to apologize. We were okay, it was just a lot. And I mean, yeah, she was right. I was being paid for something that I didn't understand, and it was a lot of money. If I can't understand it, how can I consent to it? I decided to swallow my pride and agree with her. And so that day I skipped dinner, and for the next week, I kept that up. It was a bit strange as stepping away from a strict schedule, and Chef Mike wasn't all that happy about it. He went back to making that halibut dish, looking for somebody new to appease the benefactor. I would get these occasional messages like, "No one yet," and "You sure you're still out?" The message that stuck with me the most was just, "Do you know how lucky you are?" I stopped responding after a while. Amy was doing a lot better. We started eating together again and we could be a bit more spontaneous. It was a load off my shoulders, but I would still catch myself wondering at times. Whenever 6 p.m. rolled around, was something looking through my eyes? Was it tasting my tongue? Or had it moved on? There were no more deposits. It sucked not to have that income, but it was a strange thing to rely on to begin with. And I won't lie, it was convenient as hell. But there is something uncomfortable to it. I can't put my finger on it. But after 2 weeks of stepping away from the deal, something changed. I lost my job. I'm not saying that I was the perfect employee, but I was doing a lot better now that I didn't have any distractions. It came out of nowhere. There were no mass layoffs or anything, it was just me. And on the same day as some nameless security goon is carrying my stuff to my car, I get a text from Amy. She had lost her job too. All of a sudden, that income is looking like a lifesaver. But I couldn't help but think, what if that's the point? What if this was orchestrated? How far can this benefactor reach? And that night, Amy went to see her sister. The two of them are really close and she needed some time alone. Meanwhile, I had made some spaghetti and meatballs and I sat down to eat at exactly 6 p.m. I remember sitting there at the kitchen table eating in silence, looking at my iPad across the table. I had written a question. Did you get us fired? 50 cents yes, 25 cents no. Every bite felt wrong, like somebody was watching me from inside my mouth. Like there was somebody else sitting in the same space as my body, savoring me like a goddamn juice box. It felt like I was putting on a show, making myself into a canvas to be painted on. But I finished the meal. There was a deposit later that night, $480.50. That's a yes. It got us fired. I didn't tell Amy about it. She thought that we had gotten away from that whole ordeal and now it was threatening to pull us back in. I wanted to give her some peace of mind, so I decided that I was going to do something about it. I had a plan to get this benefactor out of our lives once and for all. One evening when she was out, I sat down at 6 p.m. with a new plan. I was going to make the benefactor turn away from me forever, and I could only see one way of doing that. I had lined up a plate with orange juice, toothpaste, diced onions, and mayonnaise. That and a spoon. I had prepared an empty bucket next to me. My heart was making backflips as the clock crossed over to 6 p.m. When it did, I dug in and ate until I couldn't eat anymore. I ate and got violently ill. There were no deposits that night. For a few days, it had seemed to work. I could eat at 6 p.m. without getting a deposit. It actually lightened my mood a lot. I didn't feel watched anymore, and I think Amy noticed it too. She seemed a bit more at ease. At dinner time had become this unspoken stigma between us, but we had started to look past it. We could joke about it, plan a little outing. We might even have dinner at 6 p.m. We moved back into a better routine. I took down the post-its from the fridge. I deleted the document with all my findings. I'll admit I wasn't sure about that one. There's no harm in keeping a file on your computer. But then again, if I wanted to fully commit, I couldn't keep that stuff around. After much deliberation, I cleared it out. Things were looking up and I got a new job interview. Amy and I were looking at bigger apartments, hoping to find something within our price range. Not for now, but for when we got back up on our feet. But things don't always turn out like you want. It was the middle of the afternoon and I had spent my day talking to some old classmates. I was waiting for a response from a recruiter who had shown some interest. I got out of my car at around 4 p.m., bringing some groceries along. The front door was open and so I figured Amy was at home. I did what I always did. I spoke out loud about my day. Mark got a new job, I said. Sounds like it wasn't just me that's been laid off. No response. I got some turkey breast. I figured we could make some. I looked down at my grocery bag. Turns out somebody had switched it. This wasn't what I had bought. But for that to happen, they must have been in the car while I had checked my phone. Looking up, there was a man in my living room. He was about 6'3", slim shoulders, thick horn-rimmed glasses, a buzz cut, gray dress coat, simple blue jeans. Something in my blood froze when I saw him. I think I've seen him at Chef Mike's place. It was like coming face to face with a lion. All kinds of strange details just burned into my head. The way that he laced his shoes, the silver ring on his left index finger, the slight hint of a scar on his neck, the tinted blue sunflower on the commercial rolling in the background. We just stared at each other for a second. I counted my breaths, trying to keep my brain from spiraling. I was making 100 plans at once, and they were all incomplete. Run, scream, shout, talk. Why aren't I talking? Do something. He burst into a sprint. I dropped my groceries and got about 5 steps before he caught my neck and pushed me down. I felt something cold, metallic, and heavy push against the back of my skull. Not a word. Not a single goddamn word. The world turns black with a blindfold. I tried to listen for details, count my steps. There were more people and they were trying to disorient me. They put a hood over my head and spun me around, pushing me to the ground a couple of times. I couldn't figure out the direction that we were going. They threw me into a car, a big one by the sound of it. No one was talking, but I figured there were at least 3 people, 2 up front and 1 in the back. The car ride was over 40 minutes, but we took a lot of turns. We might have been going in circles for a while. Once we came to a stop, they pulled me out and kept driving. I never even saw the car. Still, not a word from either of them. I was pulled inside a building and escorted down some stairs, a cellar. I was pushed into a cheap chair that scraped against an uneven stone floor. And then there was a voice. Time. 4:48. Clear out. People left the room. Another chair squeaked as somebody sat down across from me. They leaned in, making sure the chains on my hands were secured to the table. Let me tell you about my job. The silence was unbearable. I could barely hear him over my own breathing. I've had a job for 6 years, he said. Best job I've ever had. Before this, I was ready to bite a bullet. I had no purpose, no income, nothing. He tapped something against my head. And then one day a man walks past me, and I look at him a little longer than I usually do. He looks weird, has a feel to him, and all of a sudden I get $20, just like that. So you know what I do? He leans in. I look a little closer. I follow him a little longer. Another 20. And you know what I find. This guy is a freak. He does some things that grown men aren't supposed to do. Things that hurt people. Good people. He leans back. Something metallic lands on the table. So instead of turning my gun on myself, I turn it on him. And I shit you not, 10 minutes later, I'm looking at a 5-figure payout out of goddamn nowhere. He taps the heavy object with his fingertips, spins it a little. Now I got a job, a very serious job, and I've learned to listen very, very well, and I don't ask questions. We sat there for a full hour. He had a wall clock that made this needlessly loud ticking noise so I wouldn't forget the seconds. I tried to calm my nerves and settle my breathing, but he would do something to constantly keep me on edge. I lost track of time completely after a while, and he was more than patient. Someone knocked on a door upstairs, a heavy door, metal reinforced. The man got up from his chair. That's your cue. It's showtime. I instantly recognized the voice as the door creaks open. Amy. They drag her down in chains, kicking and screaming. She yells my name. Not that I can do anything, it's like reaching for a teddy bear. She's just screaming to get the fear out, and it aches in me not to be able to do anything. The man has a gun. Something small clinks onto the table in front of me when he pulls off the blindfold. I'm sitting in a dark basement. There are 8 men in the room, all armed with submachine guns. They've chained Amy to the wall. They got her purse tangled up, so they cut the straps off with a Bowie knife. They're all masked. Black masks, carbon fiber with felt over the eyes. They have different skin tones and build. No visible tattoos. There are 6 plates in front of me. A bacon and water chestnut appetizer, Caesar salad with a mild cheese, lightly fried halibut with hollandaise sauce and collard greens, rice balls with a spicy mayonnaise served with steak tenderloin, a turkey burger slider, and a cup of chocolate lava cake for dessert. 3 perfectly placed glasses of red wine, water, and white wine. Amy is screaming herself to death. I can hear her voice breaking. I realize that one of the men are behind me and he's holding something. I can hear a leather strap just inches from the back of my head. He's pointing something at me. Once the clock turns to 6 p.m., one of the men nod at me. Bon appetit. I take my time with the dishes. I don't want to give them an excuse to shoot me in the back of the head. It all tastes like salt anyway. I must have bitten my tongue when they attacked me. The wine burns my tongue and my eyes water. A little blood drizzles out of the corner of my lips. Amy is a mess. She's on her knees repeating please over and over like a mantra. She is terrified of strangers and the claustrophobia isn't helping. No one is budging. They're not even looking at her. I take bite after bite, knowing full well that I'm being looked at from the inside out. You can taste the salt on my tongue. You can feel the pieces sliding down my gullet. You can feel my nervous stomach rumbling as I force myself to chew. How can he want this? One of the men checks their watch. Send the chef home. Have our guest finish in 10 minutes or kill the girl. Make it a challenge. The man standing behind me huffs and grabs my head and smashes it into the table. The table cracks a little cheap plastic probably stolen from a yard. He doesn't have a gun. He has some kind of pop rivet. He's not killing me, he's going to hurt me bad. It takes me a moment to register the pain. He pulls out my tongue and pierces it with a rivet. Start the clock. I can't feel my tongue. My eyes water. I try to eat without chewing, but the salt feels like sticking my mouth into a wall socket. I bite, chew, and swallow. Bite, chew, swallow. I'm a machine. I'm doing this. Pain doesn't kill you, but by God, it's the worst that I've ever felt. It's supposed to be good. It smells nice, but it sticks to my stomach lining like a sore cold. They're gonna kill her. I can see the gun. They're gonna kill her. I finish with a couple of minutes to spare. I almost choke on the white wine. I knocked over a couple of plates and it looked like somebody fed it all to a starving dog. I had barbecue glaze on my fingers. Hands are faster than forks. Looks good, one of them said. Hope you enjoyed your meal. Another one leaned in from behind, tapping me on my shoulder with an automatic weapon. What time are you having dinner tomorrow? He asked. It wasn't really a question. It would never be a question again. 6 p.m. I got $25. No cents. I still have my dinner at 6 p.m. to this day. I would like to say that Amy and I have found some kind of normalcy in all of this, but she turns pale every time I walk away to eat. We don't talk about it. We talk about everything but that. I've started getting deposits again. Not as big as I used to, but still significant. I've noticed I get a bit more if Amy is in the room, watching in silence. I've tried thinking about it in other ways. Like I'm not a captive in my own body, but maybe an influencer to an audience of one, or a curator, a reviewer. Maybe there's some magical thing that I can do that will grant me some kind of lenience, I don't know. But for now, I don't have any options. Every day I step away from whatever I'm doing and I have dinner. And I have it at exactly 6 p.m.